2019. And the first item of business today is adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda from the board? Any adjustments to the agenda from staff? I will note for the commissioners that we do have 2 time certain items for 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock this morning, and we also have our volunteer luncheon today. So just keep an eye on the clock today. With that, we'll move on to public comment, and this is folks' opportunity to address the board. If when I call your name, if you'll step up to the podium, state your name and where you live, and you don't have to give your specific address, and I will start the timer for your 3 minutes after that. First person signed up is Emily Semple, followed by David Piccioni.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Emily Semple, I live in Eugene. I wanted to be here last week to talk to you about closing the butterfly lot. However, I was in a meeting with a business owner downtown discussing the downtown challenges of homelessness. I'm here to tell you that I am disgusted with your decision to put a curfew on the butterfly lot. It was the last remaining Lane County-owned land that was open 24 hours a day. The Free Speech Plaza closes at 11. The Bill of Rights doesn't sleep at night. I think you made the wrong decision. I would like you to be bolder in your work with our homelessness challenges, especially in downtown, where the businesses are struggling. I urge you, if the City Hall lot, butterfly lot, land swap goes through, that you will use your already fenced lot to put in a downtown day center and a dusk to dawn place for people to sleep downtown. 99's full. And the people who live downtown are still living downtown, and the businesses still want them to not be here. But you have to give people a choice. So if we don't want them on a sidewalk, we need a place downtown. Please, let's do something real. Let's be bold. Let's help our people. And let's have a place where we can talk 24/7. If we can't peacefully assemble and practice our rights to free speech, we aren't the United States of anything. And I don't want to be Lane County, land of the silent. Thank you.
David Piccioni, followed by Dave Cooley.
Hi, I'm Dave Piccioni, live in Eugene, yeah, there's a lot of talk about homelessness, and it's important to provide shelter for people that don't have a place to call their home. There are walls to protect them from the cold and from the rain and stuff. But this brings to attention, too, that there are other problems that homeless people have, and that is not sufficient food, or maybe you could say quality food. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's eating food that's plant-based rather than animal-based. There's a lot of institutions that have been ruling the diet discussion throughout many years. There's the religious view that, you know, we should sacrifice animals and we can eat fish and all that in the Bible. There's schools that teach that. A lot of schools give their students handouts, but these handouts are not provided by research. They're part of the PR of the Meat and Dairy Council. They give it to school not to necessarily educate the children, but to instill in them the belief that they need enormous amounts of protein to be healthy. The amount of protein that we eat in America, nobody of any diet style is going to lack in protein. Bread has protein, potatoes have a lot of things that you would think are carbohydrates. They have enough protein in them to sustain and fix the body when there's damage, which is what protein is for, growth. Then the parents also tell the children you should, drink milk and blah, blah, blah. The medical establishment, doctors are not required to take intensive nutrition classes. I think they're supposed to take one 4-credit class in nutrition, and 68% of all diseases are diet related. So obviously this is not being addressed very well or at all. And environmentally, we are, like everything that happens on this planet affects every other part of the planet. In the Amazons, they cut down a ton of, a large fraction of the Amazon forest gets cut and planted, grass is planted there to grow cattle, and that is eliminating our oxygen and our oxygen in our air purity. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, David. Dave Cooley, followed by Bobby Patel.
Good morning, I'm Dave Cooley, and I've lived here my entire life, except for 6 months. I was born in Portland, I got tired of that, and I left, came to Eugene in 1949. Anyhow, I work at the car lot that's across the street from the St. Vincent's service station, and I've been a local business owner of my own for 20-some years, and I've joined another car lot. And I know the fellow for 18 of those 20 years that he's been in business. Anyhow, he's been there at that location for about 12 years. And so I'm speaking on his behalf, but also on all of our behalf, not just the car lot. And you'll hear from Bobby here soon. Anyhow, I just made a list of all the things that have happened since and I know this is not a fix-all, or, you're here to listen, hopefully, for some ways to improve what's going on. But just since the folks have moved in there, and I have a lot of compassion for homeless myself. I work in another area that I support homeless, and I'm a mentor at sponsors and so on. Anyhow, we've had to install a new fence in the back lot because people were jumping the fence and sleeping in cars or stealing stuff out of the car. There's theft for our pop machine. They break into that. The gate's been kicked in multiple times. There's folks scaring the customers. Of course, that's mental illness and other things going on there, but we can't stop folks from walking through, and we're very, we don't, if you don't want somebody to yell, don't start yelling at them. So we use compassion quite a bit too. And then there's threats of violence, and folks are afraid to come into our lot. Yelling and screaming is going on numerous times during the day. That happened before the camp was set up. And then there's animal and human feces on our property, and dog fights, and there's increased drug activity. There's decrease in public safety. Our office manager is afraid to go and get the mail, and she's also afraid to go get into her car, which is parked just outside the fence, and it's dark over there. And so we'll have to readjust. And then there's a decrease in our traffic with our customer base. So, it's a challenge for everyone, and it doesn't like you move folks somewhere else. The problem isn't going away. So it's stronger than ever, because one of the reasons is I heard, and I'm assuming this is true, that folks from other cities around the country have sent folks to Eugene with a one-way bus ticket, and for a reason, because Eugene has a tendency to want to help folks at a deeper level for the homeless, and other cities don't even do anything. So that's one reason, and that's a well-known fact. Anyhow, The other thing that I would support is a way to address mental illness and state of mind. And I'm actually working with someone that has a way to improve that in a large and effective way. And I won't go into all that, but there are ways to, you know, sort of raise the bottom. And I've been in the midst of seeing that with my own eyes throughout my time being a mentor and other areas that I work in. So it is possible. And of course, you got to have an ounce of willingness to even go forward with how you're going to move out of where you're at. Anyhow, my oldest brother, who is well-seasoned and well-traveled, was this is directly related in some way, but anyhow, he was over in the Philippines about 3 years ago, and something perforated his stomach. He got his stomach removed, and he had to rehab himself out of, being with no stomach, and he had to gain 50 pounds, and anyhow, he was damn near dead. Well, here he is. He's 77 here in a day or two, and I sold him a car, so he's been traveling around camping for about 190 days. Well, now he's in Eugene, and I'm trying to help him support, get back on. He's not an alcoholic or an addict or anything, but it's just, I'm very interested in how we help in the way that we do, and I'm supporting him as best I can, but it's a challenge no matter where you're at. And some of the folks that I work with have been homeless and have taken advantage of some of the services around, and they've got jobs now. So, I'm full of energy, and I've got some ideas, and I'm more here to help than to badger. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Bobby Patel, followed by Rob.
Hello. So I'm here first time, and I own the business on Highway 99, and I'm trying to save my business. I have a big problem, and I'm a little angry too about this homelessness thing. Since you guys are promoting and supporting this homelessness and don't care about the little business or small business or big business, which is their last 40 to 50 years we've been there, You guys never ever come and ask us before you even open this site to what is gonna be impact on your business and what's gonna happen with your guests, and you've been residents 40 to 50 years and paying your taxes and stuff. Okay. Discussing, there is no any discussion. Helping them one time is a smart act, not for the lifetime. That's my point. If you really want to feel our experience, what we have experienced, being there, running the business and living there with these people, you better take few of them to your backyard. That's the way you can understand what feeling we are feeling there, okay? So what we have exactly experienced in living with these guys, all time our dog barking, smoke smells, they're burning illegal stuff. You can smell the plastic to burn some meat, like burning some skin style, So the smell of garbage and toilet and marijuana, illegal activity, 24/7 argument, dog barking. And those arguments are fighting with the profanity language. We all listen that just by the 10 foot. 10 foot by them, I have a rooms, which is a non-smoking rooms. People come for the game and event, they listen all this. It's a very bad impression on them. I'm losing my business, their reputation, and the city's reputation also about that area, So they're walking anytime, biking anytime in a motel without the permission, and trying to renting a room, and once we rent the room, I can show you picture and the movie, I have a tons of them. Trashing the room like I never see my garbage even like that, okay? And you guys helping those people, harassing the tenants. They're harassing the employees and tenants, both. The employees are fear. They feel unsafe to work over there now, and knocking the guest doors, asking the favors, and asking the drugs even. You know, the guests always concerned before they even check in. They're concerned about their safety, their car safety, their tool safety. Who you want me to rent? You want me to bring the good customer and good people in a hotel and a city, or you want me to all these criminals over there? I can rent them too. I will make money either way, but I don't want to do that. Because I've been working in this hotel last 20 years, clean the business, clean the hotel. I don't want to go same route again. Bad impression on guest mind and area, and I'm losing my revenue also. Okay, so guests leaving a bad review on a hotel and the area. If you want to go and see online, they already write the review. Hotel is good, everything is good. Only the thing we see every morning, people pissing outside of their tent. You're welcome, I'll rent you free, guys. You stay at night, and you feel the experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, that's the only thing that was signed up. Is there a Rob? Is there additional signups back there, Devin? I saw some people walk in late. Okay. You want to go ahead? State your name, if you don't mind, for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Administrator. Eric Jackson, for the record, 99 Camp. Mr. Patel, I apologize. I didn't get your name because I walked in during you speaking. We spoke outside one day, and I'd love to speak to you more, because if you have input, I'd love to hear it. Gentlemen, there is a camp at 99 that is currently being funded publicly and privately. It's being supported publicly and privately. The majority of the things that we receive from the good people of Eugene, Springfield, Cottage Grove, and elsewhere. Coburg, if I get that right. It seems to me that for the 9 months that I've been here, that I consistently hear, we're looking for some solutions that are publicly and privately supported. You have one. To switch it to a, traditional setting that clearly has not succeeded because the people that are supervising are not vested with the individuals that they're supervising. I'm vested with every one of these campers, even the ones that I've just recently met. I find out their needs. I find out their weaknesses. I find out their strengths. I try to control their yelling as best I can. But sometimes it's me yelling, and I'll slow that down. Because that's the only way some people react. It's going on well. I'm putting together a progress report for all of you and the city councilors as well for our 30-day progress report. We've had good, we've had bad. We've had stupendous, because I have people that are back on Social Security. I have people that have quit heroin. I had two heroin addicts quit because they could sleep without fear. And they wanted to help me. They wanted to invest their time helping me with the cause that I think is very worthy. The reason that I stay in Eugene and I have not traveled on to Portland is because I think you guys can fix this. And I think you guys are absolutely crazy enough to give it a try. Eugene, there's not a bunch of normies in Eugene, as I called all the Denverites that lived in houses when I wrote my book on homelessness there with cures and answers. Eugene, I had to change my word because they're housies. Because there is no sense of straight line normal, because people are creative around here. People are supportive around here. It's very different than the environment that I left in Denver. And I stayed because of that reason. And I busted my ass for 8.5 months to get to that butterfly lot, to get to that 99 camp. And I would love to run it with the best of customer service for those guys sitting there in the front row, as well as every one of the campers. But Chief Skinner made me promise that I would go with low barrier. That would not have been my choice. That was a requirement. The cameras that were there were also a requirement, not from him, but from me. I said, I'm going to have one of your toys at least. Toys meaning the deployable camera systems. That I was the only person standing with Chief Skinner in front of City Council saying, this is a good idea. I've met with everybody in the community for 8 months. Homeless and Poverty Boards, City. Human Rights Commission, City. City Council meetings, almost weekly, every other week. You guys, once prior to now, I should have gotten involved in the Poverty Board with you guys as well, but I did not. But when you guys came to me and you made this amazing proposition, I jumped on it because I know who I'm dealing with. There's not a single counselor at Whitebird or St. Vincent's or anywhere in town that knows the amount of things that I know about the amount of things that these people go through. It's a system that can be repeated without me once an operations manual is put together. And it's easy enough to do. And there are advocates all over the country that would act like me and get to know a couple of hundred people and then try to direct them to services. You guys have no ability to deal with the services. I do. I know them all. I know most of the names of the people and the players in the game. I have directed people to services for St. Vincent's, for vets.
Jackson, can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I can. Without the lights and the timer there, it's hard. You guys need to think about giving it a chance because 60 days into it, we're going to show you that it's working. 30 days into it, it's working. Yeah, we've had an overdose. We've had 2 domestic violence fights where people are removed in handcuffs. We've had strangers come in and cause all sorts of chaos and problems that one got removed in handcuffs. But that's about it. Other than that, it's a pretty normal neighborhood. Yeah, it's close quarters. Yeah, we fight a lot. I'm going to do my best to work on it for them. Thank you.
Thank you. There were a couple other people that came in late. If you guys want to come up and state your name for the record, and I'll start your 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Walker. I am an advocate for our homeless community and have been for about 3 years now. I've seen a lot of stuff out there. I'm here to commend this group on your perseverance and dedication in addressing the issues surrounding our homeless population. In particular, I applaud the joint efforts of the PHB and representatives from all the different factions involved in trying to find solutions. I'm also happy to see that this body can make decisions quickly when you need to. I would ask that you use that same emergent response to quickly implement the winter strategies plans that have come to you through the PHB. We have numerous community members who are more than ready to assist in the implementation of those plans. We have trained advocates ready to go, and the plans that we have are not spur of the moment. We have contingencies in place to avoid some of the issues we've already seen. And, well, we want to do this the right way. I'm glad to see you said yes to something, but I'd love to see you say yes to something a little bit better and a little bit more robust. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Marie Wilson. I live in Mohawk Valley. I want to thank you guys for what you did do. And I know there's a lot of complaints and confusion, and I know this isn't an easy thing. There's no great solutions. There aren't even really any good solutions for what you guys are facing, but the 99 camp was a step in the right direction. I was there for the open house, was thanked immensely by the people who are living there. We provided food, and you know, it's a community not without its problems, I get that. I want to also dispute the idea that people are being sent here. I know that that happens. I know that some of the people that have been prominent on the news appear to be people that have traveled in recently, and that kind of gives a stigma to the people who have lived here a long time and who are locally grown homeless people. Dan Bryant, who just received an award through the Register Guard for Innovation for Square One Villages, is really clear on the statistics on that. He says 75% of the homeless are from the city that they are currently homeless in. 80 to 85% of the people that you see out here right now are from Lane County, and if you go a little bit farther, almost all of them are from the state of Oregon. There are the random people that come here. There are people who came here for jobs. There are people who came here thinking they were going to connect with family and didn't. So let's just take that out of the narrative because it's not accurate. Going forward, this weekend, Sanders Institute, if you guys go online, you'll find it, did an amazing something called The Gathering, and they addressed racial inequality, they addressed climate change, but one of the best panel discussions they had, and it's an hour and 8 minutes, and I encourage you to go look for it, was on housing and homelessness. One of the things they talked about and backstory, I went to Burlington this summer, and I was there for about 3 days, and I'm like, where are they homeless? I understand Burlington is very cold in the winter. I was there in the fall when it is absolutely gorgeous. There weren't a lot of homeless, occasional person sleeping on a sidewalk. And we didn't just do the downtown area that was beautiful. We were in throughout the community. If you go to the Sanders Institute homeless panel discussion, you'll be able to hear a woman who works primarily with community land trusts, and she explains why they have so much housing for people in an affordable level, and it's sustained housing. It stays affordable permanently, not just 10 years based on a developer, or not, it just isn't turned back into market housing. So you might look at that, and it was just amazing. And I will also say that there's a fellow living here in the community. He was chronically homeless 20 years. I made contact with him on Facebook, said, I just got to meet you. And I went and talked to him. He's got some amazing ideas. His last name is the same as mine. I'll give you his information if you'd like. But he has some really good ideas as someone who was chronically homeless and is now housed through a veterans program about how to assess people that are homeless and what you might be able to do to get more people housed quickly, but also to recognize that there are just some people that aren't going to be housed in the ways that we are thinking. So thank you very much for your time. And I do appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. So is there anyone else that wants to address the board that didn't have a chance to? Seeing none, then we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comment and or other remonstrance. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this morning it was damn cold out. I got up, I turned off my thermostat at night, and it was 58 degrees in my house. And I thought, wow, this is cold. Then I checked my weather app, and it was 25 degrees outside. I was sleeping inside. I flipped a switch. My house warmed up. People don't have switches to flip to warm up their house. And that is one of the things that drives me. Now, I don't believe there's anybody here or listening that thinks this is the first time that I've thought about homelessness. I don't think there's anybody here or listening who thinks that this is the first time that Lane County has thought about or addressed issues surrounding homelessness. But what I will say is that every day I learn something new about responses to homelessness and responses to the way we respond to homelessness, because every act has auxiliary side actions that occur. You heard from Mr. Patel today. I've stood in Mr. Patel's offices countless times, 10, 12, 15, maybe 20 times, hearing many of the things that Bobby stated this morning regarding things that are happening on the other side of the fence. And while we try to mitigate them, every day something different occurs. And it's not only from the folks who are in the tents, in the camp, but it's from, sometimes it's from people who drive by in cars. Sometimes it's from people who live across the street. Sometimes it's from neighbors, whatever it may be. But there are things that happen every single day that cause me to every single day look at things differently and try always to find ways to address the urgent needs that exist and have chronically existed, but also the ones that come up and the opportunities that come up on a regular basis for me and for this body and for all of us in this community to respond to the needs of people who were outside when it was 25 degrees last night, people who are going to be outside later on this week when it's 20, 19, 18 degrees outside, people who don't have transportation to get to the warming centers, the Egan warming centers, people who don't have a tent, people who don't have a car to park in. Last week, I asked the leadership to consider for next week's agenda a discussion regarding additional camping opportunities in parking lots throughout the county and potentially on county land. And I'm not a chair or vice chair, so I don't know how the leadership meeting went this morning, but I'm anticipating that we'll see that on the agenda, if not next week, but sometime soon. The board will be talking about additional ways for people who do have vehicles to find places to safely and legally stay at night. Now, that being said, our focus is on permanent housing always. We really are looking for ways to find places to live. People with particular conditions need particular housing. On our consent calendar today, I'm not pulling it from the consent calendar, but I'm going to mention it. Today we'll be giving authority to the county administrator to sign all documents and work through the dedication and the building of the MLK facility, a 50-bed facility. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that. The Board of Commissioners approved a board order transferring ownership of the property adjacent to LCBH to Homes for Good for the purposes of building a 50-bed facility. Now, it was the direction or the recommendation of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and we are moving forward with that. The facility is designed for people with who have the most urgent needs surrounding housing. It's a housing first facility. That's just one of the things that we're doing to try to provide permanent housing. But in the meantime, Mr. Patel, and in the meantime, I speak with Larry Bowser on a regular basis. I sit in his offices at the automobile shop. And in the meantime, you have my phone number, you have my cell phone number, and I'm prepared to respond at any time, day or night, to the particular things that come up. Now, you heard from Mr. Jackson, Eric Jackson. I spent, I don't know, better part of an hour in your shelter on Saturday morning, talking and hearing pretty much the same things that Eric stated here, that he tries to keep the sounds down at night, he tries to keep the fires out, he tries to keep things inside of the list of rules that we have that are posted on the fence. Every night something different happens, and that is the nature of it. So once again, I don't pretend that I have seen everything or know everything, because by the end of this day, I'll see something else, and I'll have a little bit more knowledge as to how I personally can begin to direct response and how I personally can help with the businesses and with the people who are suffering from the 25 and colder homelessness that is prevalent in the county. So, Mr. Patel, thank you for being here. You told me last Thursday you were going to come down today, and I was anticipating that. And thank you for a very reasonable testimony, and thank you for pointing out things that you've said to me over and over again in your office, and really continue to forward those discussions to me. We are evolving in our ways to address homelessness. Once again, it's not a year-to-year thing. It's not even a day-to-day thing. It's an hour by hour. You know, last week we passed, Councilor Semple, we passed an emergency clause on an ordinance to close the Butterfly parking lot at night, a curfew. It matches the city's curfew on the blocks across the street. It's the same curfew as the city. So, you know, but that being said, the county is working to provide land and space for people who are suffering from the conditions surrounding homelessness. And beyond that, we are working to alleviate chronic homelessness and to prevent ongoing homelessness. So I want to thank you all for being here this morning. Thanks for coming in. And once again, it was 58 degrees in my house and it was darn cold. It's 25 degrees outside. We are trying, every single day, we're trying to evolve new ways to address the needs of the people who, like Tom Egan, who I served in the National Guard with, like Tom Egan, who died on the street, froze to death on the street this month, 14 years ago. So it's, we need to prevent that, and we are working every single way we can. This board has unanimously worked on issues, conditions surrounding homelessness. And I see Sarah Means in the back of the room today. I know that Sarah's job today is going to be in large part talking to folks surrounding the 99 camp. So it is an ongoing effort. Ms. Patel and Larry, Dave, thank you for being here today. So There's a lot to say, and I'm not going to belabor everybody with anything else, but the Poverty and Homelessness Board has a subcommittee, the Children Supportive Housing Development Subcommittee. You're welcome to join it. The Poverty and Homelessness Board meetings are now aired live and repeated on cable TV. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me. There is one other thing that I'm going to say, and this is to you, Commissioner Lycan, and this is on the brighter side, so pardon me for flipping. Last week, you mentioned Thurston had won the state championship in 5A football. Well, Sheldon, in my district, played for the state championship in 5A football. And Josh Lyon, the coach, used to work for me at Jerry's. Josh did a great job of coaching Sheldon to a loss in the final game. But it's great to see local teams faring well in football, kids succeeding, and kids finding ways to stay in school, enjoy school, and thrive in school. Lake Oswego beat Sheldon on Saturday, excuse me. And as a side note, in 1972, I broke my ribs playing against Lake Oswego in football. so I wish Sheldon could have taken care of that for me, but they didn't. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who came for public comment today and addressing one of the most significant issues that we have in our community, namely that there are people year-round, not just in the winter, but also in our increasingly hot summers, that are homeless. And we're torn as a community as to what to do. And that explains some of the slow action by government, because the community itself is divided about what to do. But as was mentioned, we have been partnering with Homes for Good, a board that 5 of the 5 Lane County commissioners are on. There are 7 Homes for Good commissioners, and 5 are elected, and 2 are appointed. And the Homes for Good board and the Lane County Board of Commissioners have partnered for the Housing First facility that will be built in this community. And I think it will be a phenomenal improvement, because it is a way to get people transition from homelessness into a more healthier lifestyle. The Highway 99 camp that arose because of the county's ability to acquire land through tax foreclosure, and the county administrator identifying this newly owned county land was really an act of great leadership. And we just have to thank Mr. Mokrahysky for recognizing the tremendous opportunity that existed by the acquisition of this newly owned public land in an area which has a relatively high homeless population, and also some services that are available. Now, in my view, we're not doing enough to address the problems of homelessness. There's a lot of speeches about homelessness, but I don't think we're doing enough. In January of 2019, the board will be holding a big budget workshop with our county administrator and staff. So these commissioners and the new ones that will join the board, the then constituted new board will be holding a multi-hour workshop on what the proposed budget will be. And allocating money is a big part of what this budget meeting is going to be. And of course, there's a lengthy budget process, appointment of a budget officer, appointment of a budget committee. Budget committee makes a big decision. Board of Commissioners makes a big decision. But my point is that if you are advocates for improving this, these are opportunities for you to be involved. And last but not least, I'll point out that although the focus on the homeless problem is most dire in winter, when we've seen on our own streets people die on our own streets because they didn't have adequate housing, I believe the problem in the summer is getting worse and worse and worse. And at least in the news reports I've seen, the number of people dying in the summer in American cities, now that's cities, not to be confused with the whole country, but is actually now exceeding the winter because we are doing something about the winter as a collective society. So I'll just leave you with these thoughts, and that is that I don't think there's a single person up here that doesn't want to try to do something to solve these problems. I think we have a lot of maybe disagreements about how much money to put into it, and I do have concern over whether or not we're going to really have the resources to do what needs to be done. But I do appreciate everyone coming today, and thank you for your public comment.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments, but I wanted to veer away from that just for a moment, if I could. And that is, I would like to just mention about the passing of President George H.W. Bush. Probably, you know, if you think about a man who believed so much in public service, obviously with his family and what he contributed to this country. You know, I heard something over the weekend. I thought it was so apropos. They talked about George H.W. Bush. The minute that he walked into the Oval Office was probably the most qualified person ever in this country to ever be elected President of the United States, if you look at his background. Congress, UN ambassador, ambassador to China, CIA director, vice president, president. I don't think we've ever had somebody like that with those accomplishments, unless you go back to maybe the first 6 presidents, because John Quincy Adams' accomplishments were pretty impressive as well. So, and I am a historical buff, especially when you look at our presidents. But there was a caption that just caught my eye, and it was one of the most moving captions ever. Whoever took the picture, they don't win an award, it'll be, to me, shameful in a sense. And I don't know if you knew, but President Bush, when Barbara passed away, he was given a service dog. And the service dog was actually named after Chesley Sullenberger. So the service dog's name was Sully. And there was a caption of Sully. It was a yellow lab. And the caption was Sully in front of the flag-draped casket of President Bush, with the caption that said, "Mission accomplished." That was about as moving of a picture I think I've ever seen. And they talked about what's next for Sully. Sully's going to go off and work with veterans who have come back wounded. And so that will be Sully's remaining life as a yellow lab. But I just thought that was so moving and so incredible. But if you think about one of the things that I heard is President Bush served 1 term, and as we know, but that 1 term was so set up for him, and because the Cold War was ending, what he did was when he galvanized the entire world, in a sense, to stop Saddam Hussein from going really directly into Kuwait, who knows beyond that. But he was there for that 1 purpose, 1 term, because of his incredible foreign policy experience, his background, his relationships with world leaders, maybe like we've never seen. And after that 1 term, and he lost, but after that 1 term, it seemed like his reputation just went like this. Just kept going higher and higher and higher. And maybe one of the most curious was, of course, at the end, President Bush and President Clinton became extremely, very, very close friends. And who had ever thought that as well? So I just wanted to comment on that, on the fact that while it's sad to see him go, he lived a full life, obviously, at 94 years old, but it's great to see the bipartisanship again. Folks are coming out and they're next to each other. Republican, Democrat, didn't matter, to celebrate the incredible life of George H.W. Bush. And that's a lesson learned, I think, for all of us as we go into the, in a sense, the next decade. So I thank you for that. And that was really my comments this morning. There's going to be plenty of comments on the topic at hand from this morning. I will say that, and I'm looking at Mike out here, he used to work for the Springfield Police Department. We've been very fortunate in our downtown in Springfield, and I know there's talks about the city and downtown. There's actually 12 incorporated cities in Lane County, and I just want to make sure we understand that. There's not 1, there's 12. But downtown Springfield is actually been cleaned up enormously. And that strategy actually began in 2002, just so you know. It didn't happen overnight. 2002, step by step by step, starting with public safety first, and then we hit the urban renewal district, and then we hit the, with the economic development. And today, what I have gathered, and when I talk to folks in downtown Springfield, something unique is beginning to happen that I haven't seen in a long time, and that is young professionals are actually moving their new offices into downtown Springfield. Something that I thought I wouldn't see, but here they are. And you have young professionals, you have new businesses. I know that for a long time, Jim's Landing used to be an eyesore, and today it's George and Violet Steakhouse, and I'm looking forward to going to eat there as well. This is new restaurants, new eateries, and it's been pretty incredible. But I just want to make note, that strategy did not happen overnight. It had started in 2002, and it took about 12 years in order for that to happen. So you have to have a strategy in place, stick with it, and be patient. And at the end of the day, it's amazing on what you can accomplish. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Chair, just one 45 seconds.
brief, because we got a 10
Very,
o'clock
very
time,
brief
sorry.
indeed, yeah. You know, just a reminder, and thank you, Commissioner Sorensen, for talking about the budget process, because for the fiscal year 18-19 budget, Lane County established a $2 million housing improvement plan fund, which is designed to support supportive housing, permanent supportive housing. That was $2 million that Mr. Mokaiski, you were able to find in the budget to support permanent supportive housing. It's a part of the 50-unit housing first for chronically homeless individuals with the most serious mental illnesses are a part of that project. And it's as a part of the Poverty and Homelessness Board and the Shelter and Supportive Housing Development Committee's pledge to add 600 housing first units or supportive housing units between now and 2021. So thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Sorensen. It is an important part of our budget process, and we have responded.
Thank you. So briefly, I just want to mention a couple things. One, you know, we do have some items on our consent calendar that weren't pulled during adjustments for agendas, so we won't talk about them separately, but I'll just mention, because they are, all three of the H&HS items deal with issues that are experienced by our homeless population. We'll probably talk a little bit more about item 1 under the administrator's report to us, but item 2 is receiving a SAMHSA grant that's going to help deal with opiate addiction. And you know, as we talk about preventing homelessness or getting people out of homelessness, that is a significant driver in that area. Item 3 is about you know, starting the process of being able to finalize the plans for what is now known as the Commons on MLK. The Housing First project has a name now, and it's actually 51 units, as during some of the preliminary design, they've done some value work, and they actually figured out how to sneak another unit into it, so without changing the price. So we're moving ahead with, you know, that low barrier permanent supportive housing, and we do have a track record of trying to address this issue as the board, including our Fuse project, which has now become almost a nationwide model that's, you know, had presentations by Commissioner Farr at the National Association of Counties, presentations here at the Oregon Association of Counties from our staff, where we are connecting people with services. We do know how to connect people with services, Mr. Jackson. Our Fuse project is specifically that, of taking the most chronically homeless people and bringing them into low barrier housing and connecting them with intensive case management. And it's been so successful that it's being invested in by not only our local coordinating care organization, it's also been invested in by the federal government through a SAMHSA grant. So just, you know, really, you know, we are working these issues and doing the best we can. We have spent a significant amount of money on a study from TAC to look at and map out our system for addressing homelessness. And one of the interesting things from the TAC people was it took them longer than they expected because we have such an extensive system here in Lane County, much bigger and broader than communities of this size and complex. What TAC did do is look at where are our gaps and what do we need to do, and set out a set of strategies to address those gaps to ultimately work towards zero unsheltered people. And we're working on, with the City of Eugene and our partners through the Poverty and Homelessness Board, of working towards those strategies that are going to ultimately permanently address those issues. So I feel we're moving in that direction in a very strong way. I do want to briefly address something that came up in a Register Guard letter editor yesterday, and that was a concern that somehow or another we hadn't properly noticed and given public access to the fact that we held a public hearing last week on the hours of operation for the butterfly lot. The Register Guard changed their procedures for their community calendar about a year or so ago, where they actually require us to physically input them ourselves to do their work for them. We were doing that pretty regularly for a while, only to have them not printed quite often. So it kind of got to be an issue about whether we spent staff time or not putting stuff in the community calendar. We do supply our agenda and our meetings notices to the Register Guard on a weekly basis on Wednesdays. And we supply it to all the media. And in fact, for that meeting last week, there were no less than 6 specific news stories and everything from print to television, and 15 other stories about other items that reference that hearing. So the fact that, we didn't have people attend the hearing was not because we did not do a good job of putting it out in public. I will say we'll try and work with the Guard better to include our agenda items in their calendar, but that is not for lack of trying. And I just want to let that be known. I also want to thank Commissioner Sorensen for leading a discussion last week as we discussed that item about time, place, and manner restrictions on free speech and whether or not our actions were going to impact that. And it was Commissioner Sorensen's discussion of that and his ultimate yes vote supporting it, because we do have the ability to take some time, place, and manner restrictions, and we still had other places that were open 24 hours in this community. So it was a unanimous vote supporting that action last week to match our hours of operation with the City of Eugene's Park Blocks hours of operation and our Free Speech Plaza hours of operation that were already in place. So I just want to thank Commissioner Sorensen for walking us through some of the legal aspects of that with our county council. And I would recommend folks maybe watching the first part of that hearing as Commissioner Sorensen went through a Q&A on that issue. So with that, I'd like to move on in our agenda because we have got a 10 o'clock time certain, and I want to get our employee recognition done before then. Is there any emergency business today?
No.
Seeing none, let's move on to employee recognition. And Karen, I apologize for making you wait. When I started into the agenda, it looked like we only had a couple people for public comment, and it grew. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are fortunate to have the time this morning to recognize 2 of our outstanding employees in Lane County. I want to introduce you to Jennifer Guyan and Renee Thompson. They are administrative assistants in our Department of Health and Human Services, and they really have done some incredible work that we're excited to share with you. Jennifer and Renee serve Health and Human Services internal recruitment and hiring function. How many employees do we have in our largest department now, Karen?
Well, number of employees is somewhere between probably 670 in that area. We have a lot of employees.
Almost, a third to half of our employees in this organization in our largest department. And as of October 1 of this year, I read this and I'm like, really? As of October 1, Jennifer and Renee have helped Health and Human Services fill 219 positions, including new hires, promotions, and the hiring of extra help positions. I had to reread that like 3 times. I'm like, 219 people in 2 months? That's incredible. So obviously this is no small task, and without Jennifer and Renee's significant efforts, HHS would be vastly understaffed. And so we have our outstanding human resources team that does recruitment, but with nearly 1,500 employees throughout our organization, and such a large number of employees that Health and Human Services is hiring, it really requires dedicated staff within the department to take the lead on those efforts. So through their creative approaches via social media, classified ads, internal promotion, and other strategies, and their commitment to the task at hand, we have not only been able to fill these important positions, but we've actually increased the number of applicants that we've received for those positions, as well as the quality of applicants. So that's always a significant effort. And you know, as the board, I know, understands that particularly as the economy gets better in our community and throughout the state, it becomes more difficult to recruit qualified candidates for positions. And so it actually, in the last several years, has in many ways been more difficult to recruit and retain employees because there's so much competition out there, particularly in these fields of health and human services. So we wanted to bring Renee and Jennifer here to recognize them in front of the board and to our organization and the public, and thank them for their outstanding commitment to make Lane County a great place to live, work, and play. Of course, we always talk about our 3 core behaviors that we value in our employees: a passion to serve, a drive to connect, and a focus on solutions. And they've represented, I think, all 3 of those behaviors in the great work that they've done. So I want to thank you for your outstanding efforts. We have certificates here to share with you, and I, Karen, want to ask you to share any additional comments.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. I want to set this particular recognition in a little bit of context. You've spent the first hour this morning talking about a lot of issues related to the work that happens through Health and Human Services. And that work doesn't happen. Our impact in the community, whether it's around housing and homelessness or the myriad of other services, we can't do that if we don't have employees in those positions to do that work. And what Jenny and Renee do every day is make sure that we have the very best employees who are available to us in those positions, in those seats. Whenever someone retires or gets promoted, it creates another vacancy. And when the county administrator was talking about our core values, I was thinking in particular about that focused on solutions piece. Given the size of Health and Human Services, we have somewhere north of 50 hiring supervisors within the department. So that means that Jenny and Renee divide us up between them of who they're going to make sure gets steered through that process of being able to get our positions filled and onboard our new staff. So that alone takes huge amounts of problem solving that Jenny and Renee do every day as each of us as hiring supervisors try to navigate that work. I do have an update. We have a board in our admin office at Health and Human Services where we keep the tally of how many new employees have been brought in through Jenny and Renee's work. And I checked the board this morning before I came over, and we're up to 268. And again, that represents tremendous impact in the community as we go about with our mission of improving people's lives in the community. Really having qualified employees in the department is a huge part of that. So Jenny and Renee work with our supervisors and our HR department in that liaison role, and they're also the beginning of our new employee orientation process. They really welcome in our new employees, help begin that orientation to what it means to work at the county. Before an employee goes to new employee orientation, they meet with Jenny and Renee. So that work is huge for us. And so I tremendously appreciate the work that they do every day, and I'm really thankful for the appreciation from the board today as well.
Well, thank you. And thank you to both of you for such great work on such a critical item. And I just want to take a moment just to say,
yes.
So I appreciate that. I believe that there's probably a photo op that has to happen sometime briefly. So maybe while you guys step away for your photo op, the board can handle our consent item. But thank you for the great work, and thank you for modeling our core values.
Thank you so much.
So while they're stepped away, we'll move on to the consent calendar, which are items that are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted in one motion. And if you want to look at the details on these, you can go to our agenda online and click View Materials under each item, and they'll give the board report and all the specifics about each item. With that, I will look for a motion. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of the December 4th, 2018 consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So with that, I think we are just about right on time for our 10 o'clock time certain. And we have Order 18-12-0406 in the matter of a loan forgiveness request from Orchid Health Collective LLC in the amount of $19,600 and to authorize the county administrator to sign the contract. And we have Austin Ramirez here.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, and good morning, Commissioners. Joining me is Orion Falvey. He is the co-founder and executive director of Orchid Health. And in the audience, we have Bill Roller. He is their new administrative director, and both of them are available if you have any questions, so please feel free. Just to give some brief background on the item, in 2014, the board awarded a $70,000 business incentive award to Orchid to open their first clinic in Oak Ridge. $35,000 of that was a grant. The other $35,000 was a low-interest loan, of which $17,500 was forgivable upon certain conditions. Orchid met all those conditions very quickly, and the remaining $17,500 plus interest is due June 30th, 2019. The reason we are here today is because Orchid has requested that the remaining amount in interest in a total of $19,600 be forgiven, with the understanding that these savings will be invested in a new clinic within Lane County. Using the annual unmet healthcare needs report from OHSU, they've identified Cottage Grove as the leading location. I can honestly say, after seeing Oak Ridge, what they've done in Oak Ridge personally and looking at the data, that we are very fortunate to have an organization like Orchid already in Lane County, and even more so now that they would like to open a second clinic. Not only do they create jobs in rural communities and hire locally, in the few years they've been operational, they've accomplished amazing things. I think most critical is that they've never turned away a patient based on their ability or inability to pay for health care. They also directly contribute to our vibrant communities and a safe and healthy county. So at that, I'll ask Orion to maybe say a few things and open it up for any comments or questions.
Thank you, Austin, and thanks for having me this morning. It's great to see you. So yeah, it's been about 4 years since I sat here last, and I really appreciate that original $70,000 that made it possible for us to open our clinic in Oak Ridge. At the time, it was recognized by OHSU and the Office of Rural Health as the most underserved community, and that's looking at the number of professionals in the community, primary care providers, mental health, dental, and ancillary services. Over the last 4 years, we've brought in some of the best doctors in the state to work in that community. We've also brought in mental and behavioral health services and integrated dental services into Oak Ridge that 4 years ago did not have behavioral health or dental, and there was one small clinic operating there. And so it's been a big success and a very fulfilling business opportunity for me to get to found and grow. And our business model is successful. We opened our second clinic in Estacada, which is in Clackamas County, another very underserved rural community. And that is our mission at Orchid, is to serve our state's underserved communities. And unfortunately, Lane County does have a handful of additional communities that are on that list, high up on the state's list of not having professionals in those communities providing access to healthcare services. And so, like Austin mentioned, our mission is to bring quality, compassionate, integrated care to these communities that sometimes it's not financially viable for larger entities to open up bigger clinics in these communities. And so that's why we're here today. With the forgiveness of the $17,500 and the accrued interest, that would go to either A, opening a new clinic in Cottage Grove, or B, expanding our clinic in Oak Ridge to create more space so that we could partner with additional agencies to bring physical therapy and other, again, ancillary and specialty services to Oak Ridge. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Mr. Chair, you talked about an interesting statistic. Well, you talked about our FUSE program a moment ago, frequent user system engagement, which we try to identify the people who are the highest users of the emergency rooms, among other things, and place them in permanent supportive housing. In just a second, I'm going to recite a statistic, but I remember in 2014, is in January, I think 2014, I was the chair of the board, and you all came and you had this wild-eyed plan, and it sounded good to me. And I thought, man, if this thing can work, this is going to be great for Oak Ridge and soon to be Estacada and soon to be Cottage Grove, and a model for all smaller rural communities that are remote from ERs and remote from the type of healthcare that we expect in a larger metropolitan area or a semi-metropolitan area like Eugene. But significantly, Mr. Chair, I want to point out that over the course of 3 years, you've reduced the emergency department utilization for Trillium Medicaid patients by 42%. Now think about those numbers. Think about the public benefit of that and the savings to the public of the reduction of emergency room services by 42%. And you're asking for 17.5 plus interest? Oh my gosh, I think that's a cheap deal. Well done, thank you very much.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, I just want to make note, former Commissioner Stewart was really involved and active in this, and I just wanted to make note of his leadership to get where we are today with your organization. It's great to see you expand and grow, but when this was on Phase Radar real early on, and I think because of Orchid, obviously it was in his district, Oak Ridge, and I know that he brought that awareness to this board to make us aware of what was going on with Orchid so that we could, at that time, do the right thing. And so I just want to make note of that, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank both of you and others as well for the success that you have shown. I mean, this is a phenomenal problem in our country of underserved areas and how to get them medically served. So this is really a great success. A few years ago, I was camping, I think it was up the Clackamas River, east and south of Estacada, and I was kind of wondering, because it's even more remote than the area around Oak Ridge. I was kind of wondering, well, if someone got hurt on our little camping trip, where would they go? And so I just, on a personal level, I can see that there's these medically underserved areas in urban areas, but also in rural areas, in remote rural areas. So I really appreciate the fact that you've been able to do something that many people talk about, but you've actually done it and now you're expanding. And I'm wondering, two things. One is, what is the connection, what could be the connection, just like to hear your views on this, of the, to the urban setting, the underserved urban setting. Any ideas on how your success in the underserved rural could be applied in the underserved urban?
Yes, thanks for asking that question. I want to note first that we've gotten to where we are today via close partnerships and support from our urban partners. I've been working closely with the County Public Health Department, and Trillium CCO is a very close partner of ours. And I think that we do share our successes. We attend monthly Trillium business meetings and integrated primary care behavioral health collaboration meetings, and so we are part of a larger community, and we've been able to share our successes and our model because it does apply to the underserved in urban areas. What we're doing does apply. And so I think that there is a great community, and we have a unique opportunity being in a defined population like Oak Ridge, where we can look at our zip code and know that that is our population. So we have access to certain data and outcomes that we can use to our advantage and share with the larger community. So we are active in those partnerships.
Good. Thank you very much, and appreciate your success, and glad this is helping.
So I just want to say thank you also for the work you've done out there in Oak Ridge, and I'm glad that Commissioner Lykin brought up former Commissioner Stewart's leadership in this because he actually was an extreme advocate for you guys with the board and getting going, because it did seem like kind of a wild-haired idea at the time to, loan these guys some money and they're going to start a medical clinic out where there's really no professionals to recruit and everything else. It just sounded really like an impossible thing to do. Yeah. So the fact that you guys were successful just speaks to your organization and the drive behind it. And it is really, an amazing thing to have that access to health care, both physical and mental, out there in that community. As we, have a long conversation through public comment today about homelessness, one of the drivers for homelessness sometimes is medical bills and also lack of good behavioral health. That often leads to self-treatment through, addiction and other issues that ultimately lead to homelessness. So you guys are actually on the forefront of preventing homelessness out there in our rural communities. What I'd love to see is, as after you get done with Estacada and Cottage Grove, kind of think about whether or not there's a model to bring maybe some, at least your behavioral health side down into the Mapleton to Triangle Lake corridor of Highway 36. There is a dearth of mental health providers in West Lane County. And it doesn't have a single community because it's kind of these small little communities that are dots along a highway. And that's part of the reason why they don't seem to have that centralized care, and the distances involved to get to care are really difficult because there's very little mental health provision in Florence. A lot of physical health down there, but mental health is really tough. And it's an hour drive in good weather into Eugene to receive that. So just put it out on your radar screen for some time in the future. We'll let you get successful in the other two cities first, but I just can't say enough about the success you've had in Oak Ridge and how important that has been to our community, and just one little piece in all of our strategies to, that we're trying to do to address, health equity across the county and access to health care, and what it does in the way of preventing other issues in our community. Helping people manage chronic conditions like diabetes prevents so much future cost for our community and health. So you guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate the work you've done. Thank you. So if there's no further comment from the board, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval Order 18-120406 in the matter of a loan forgiveness request from Orchid Health Collective LLC in the amount of $19,600 to authorize the county administrator to sign the contract.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams. Discussion to the motion. Seeing, hearing none, I'll call for the vote on Order 18-120406. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll jump back in our agenda now to County Council announcements, and Mr. Dingle.
Chair, members of the board, I have no specific announcements, but I am prepared with Becky to do our quarterly update.
Yeah, I will note for the board that we are going to have an exec session after our afternoon session. One of the items, though, is being moved to next week, which is the update on current litigation, partly because Mr. Dingle's got some obligations and a conference call that sprung up, so we're just going to juggle a little bit and do it next week. So still have an exec session today, though. So with that, we will move on to item 7B, which is a report from our fatal crash investigation team. And Mr. Dingle and Ms. Taylor, I'll turn it over to you two.
I'm going to let Ms. Taylor handle the technical aspects of this.
Are we having difficulty getting our screen up and running? Somebody's got to flip a switch.
Devin was yelling, "Don't touch it."
Yeah. Devin's like, "Oh no, the administrator's touching technology." Where's
while
the
we're getting this up, I can go ahead and get started. Is it coming up?
There we go. Hey.
Chair Bozich, members.
Leadership.
Members of the board, this is the third quarter? Fourth quarter, quarterly update of the Fatal Crash Investigation Team. We want to thank you for your commitment to reducing fatal collisions in Lane County. Remind you that FSIT was created in 2017 following your adoption of the Transportation Safety Action Plan. And it works under my auspice for confidentiality considerations. Let's go to the next one, Becky. So, since our last report in August, there have been 2 more fatalities on Lane County roads, one on Lorraine Highway near Gillespie Corners, involving 2 cars, and a pedestrian fatality on London Road. This continues to be a priority for the team to solve. We do have some promising data, though, in that on Lane County roads alone, there have been a decline in fatal collisions since the adoption of our TSAP in 2017. This year, we've had 7 deaths compared to 10 deaths last year and 20 in 2015. Conversely, the latest ODOT data on fatal collisions, which was issued on November 28th, shows a 6.6 increase in fatalities statewide between 2017 and 2018, and state highways are where most of the fatalities happened, 54%. But the county's share of the burden is more than the city's, 26% of the fatalities on county roads versus 20% on city streets. This is important to remember, and something that surprised a lot of us during our planning process and crash data analysis. More people are dying on rural roads than in cities. And that is a little bit counterintuitive. You think that where most of the population is, that's where most of the accidents would occur. This is a complex problem that requires multiple approaches, and we're working hard to implement enforcement, education, and engineering actions and solutions to move us towards 0 deaths. It's been a very collaborative process, and Ms. Taylor can talk about this. It is amazing what happens when you get all these folks in the room and we start talking about a problem. We start coming up with some solutions and we really start thinking outside the box, and we'll talk about some of those here at the end of this. The change we seek is no fatalities on our roads and a safety culture in which collisions aren't accidents but preventable incidents. Prevention and responsibility are the key themes for safety culture in Lane County. It's a shared responsibility. It affects all of us. We need to work together across disciplines. As we said, enforcement, engineering, education, and across all agencies. And that's exactly what we have been doing. And I'll turn it over to Becky right now.
Thank you. Good morning. On the education front, a great example of how we're working across agencies and disciplines is an exciting new safety education initiative to make driver education more accessible to rural high school students. We worked with Lane Education Service District, the rural school superintendents, and some private driver education providers. There's currently 3 private companies in Lane County that provide driver education. And we also worked with Oregon Department of Transportation to develop a solution to the lack of driver education in rural high schools. We got a grant from Oregon Department of Transportation, and with that grant, Lane Education Service District was able to hire a driver education coordinator to develop this new program. The new coordinator, Sherry Bandy, was at our last fatal crash investigation team, sharing her work and the progress that she's made. The first step, she said, to launching this program is getting more instructors. So I'm going to make a plug for that now in case anyone is watching who wants to help with that effort. So to expand the rural driver education to high school students, we need more instructors. The driving school companies have said that they can't recruit or keep enough instructors, and they want to hire more instructors. The state pays for the training of the instructors, and to make it easier for people to go through the training, Lane Education Service District is hosting classes at their facility in Eugene. Again, this is the work of the new driver education coordinator at Sherry Bandy. Prior to this initiative, the training was not offered locally and people had to drive to Salem, so that was a barrier to people becoming instructors. And here on this slide is a website for people to sign up. On the engineering front, you'll start to see things being done differently on Lane County roads in our effort to save lives. Over the past 2 summers since adopting our Transportation Safety Action Plan, we've been including centerline rumble strips with pavement preservation overlays. Why? Because that's how we're going to save the most lives with engineering. The leading crash type in fatal collisions is roadway departure. Therefore, we can save the most lives if we can keep people from leaving the road. Rumble strips are the most cost-effective roadway departure countermeasure. The benefit is significant, a 30% reduction in fatal collisions. So to compare that statistic to human lives, we had 57 deaths in 2015 in Lane County. If you do the math, that year we could have saved 10 people's lives. On the enforcement front, as you know, we have very limited enforcement staff, but I'm really proud of our sheriff's office and grateful for their work. They actually work overtime throughout the year for some targeted DUI enforcement, and we thought at a minimum we could create some graphics and posters to help support their work and get the word out into the community. And because the intent is really to deter intoxicated driving, and we're not trying to catch someone doing something wrong, we're trying to encourage them to do the right thing. And this slide is about building appreciation for the value of traffic patrol. I realize it's difficult to build public support for traffic control. I've heard a lot of false perceptions from people, such as they want officers fighting real crimes and that traffic policing is just a revenue generator. In reality, if we're concerned about saving people's lives, these national statistics from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration show the impacts of crashes. 1 person dies every 16 minutes in a crash. So that's a much greater risk than murder or other crimes. And again, in the local context, in 2015, 57 people died in Lane County from traffic collisions. And if we had 57 homicides in Lane County in 1 year, there would be a huge public outcry for our intervention. I'm going to turn it back to Steve to talk about some related initiatives in enforcement.
One of the things that I think people don't realize when we talk about rural traffic enforcement is it isn't just that those deputy sheriffs are out there doing traffic enforcement. They're a presence in the rural communities. They can respond to burglary calls. They can deal with other calls because they're out there, and which kind of leads to the next thing, which is one of the things we are, certainly the group would like this board to do, is support. In the governor's new budget, there's an initiative to increase the number of Oregon State police patrol officers, which again, the sheriff supports. Obviously, more folks on the road for enforcement are good. It is a stunning statistic to look at the numbers that are in there, and I know, Chair Bozovich, you gave us that sheet. Essentially, they have the same number of patrol officers that they had in 1969, and the population has doubled. It's just about that way. And I told the group, I can remember growing up in rural Lebanon, where the most prominent law enforcement presence was the Oregon State Police. You saw them more than you saw deputy sheriffs. You saw Oregon State Police officers. And they were on all kinds of secondary rural roads. But they didn't just enforce traffic. They did if there was a burglary, if there was a theft, there was a runaway. They were a general, regular police law enforcement presence. So we would like to see the board support that initiative that the governor is doing. It's obviously going to take time to do that. When we talk about being creative, we've looked at anything we can do to slow people down. That includes the sheriff. Sheriff Trapp very generously agreed to let us use one of his decommissioned cars as a decoy, as long as we moved it around and put it at different places in hopes of slowing people down. We've looked at automated enforcement. And again, I want people to understand we're not just looking at these things in terms of raising revenue. These are actually have been studied and shown to reduce people's speeds. Even we've had some folks, I won't name who they are, who've been tagged with these. These are apparently very popular in Europe, and they've acknowledged that they've got speeding tickets for these for these automated things. Essentially, these are where, they take your picture as you go through things, the same sort of thing as running a red light. You just exceed the speed limit, it takes your picture, and you get a ticket in the mail. But really, our thing is not raising revenue. Our approach is to try and get people to slow down. And anything that'll do that, whether it's a decoy on the side of the road, whether it's automated traffic enforcement, we're willing to look at it. And that's part of what I wanted to close with is this group is very collaborative, very synergistic. We have all people from across all disciplines. And every time something gets thrown out there, even though there may be some issues, like certainly we've talked to the Sheriff's Office representatives about additional traffic enforcement in the traffic team, they are willing to work through those things and work through those issues and find a solution, or at least a potential solution. And that's really all I have, unless the board has any questions.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Many years ago, the city of Portland, the city of Beaverton came to the legislature and said they wanted to get these cameras going. And a number of legislators, including me, were kind of interested in the pros and cons of it, but kind of more on fear on the civil liberties end of things. Well, just how much intrusion is this by government? Are they going to put a camera in my bedroom to see what I put in my pocket before I start driving? Or when will this end, okay, in terms of government looking into what drivers do? And the narrow confines that came out of the legislation were that and it only applies, as I understand it, to Beaverton and Portland. That was kind of a legal question, is has the legislature expanded this to include the state, to include any other jurisdiction besides Beaverton and Portland?
I don't remember the Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen. Maybe Becky does. I know we talked about this specific issue because I think Mr. Kyler is part of our group. And my recollection is that there may have been some additional jurisdictions, but you're correct, they've all been specifically designated by the legislature.
Well, one of the things that I think's happened in the quarter century since this was authorized for Portland and Beaverton, which does have a much lower rate of running red lights, probably, than rural Lane County. But one of the things that came out of this was increased technology. That is, now that there's a market for this, there are now more companies that are actually selling the gear, and they're making it cheaper, and they're making it better, and they're responding to, at least at the time, a major issue of, well, what are you going to show in this photograph? And the answer is they're going to show the front end of the car, they're going to show the license, and they're going to show the person who's driving. And to minimize any civil liberties concerns is anyone who gets one of these tickets in the mail and it's not them, they just say, it's not me. And they return it, and now if they lie, say it's not them, that's a separate issue of criminal behavior. But anybody could get out of this ticket if somebody has stolen their car, or their kid has driven their car, or maybe in this day and age their grandfather has driven their car. And so, and also, is it going to be revenue neutral? In other words, is it really to respond to the public concern? Oh, you're just doing that to raise money. No, we're doing it because we have the highest death rate in the state, okay? And the other thing I was going to mention is the numbers of, like, comparing Portland traffic deaths to rural Lane County. You'd think Portland traffic deaths will be higher than rural Lane County. Just thinking about the number of people in rural Lane County, the number of people in Portland. Just the opposite, just the opposite. But I think the statistics don't really tell, that statistic doesn't really tell how serious it is. It's the per capita death rate. And I want to ask if you've used any Portland State University Center for Population Research, where they have updates each year, so you don't have to wait 10 years for the census. You have a Portland State certified demographer number by rural Lane County, or I should say unincorporated Lane County, and the 12 cities and the county as a whole. So I would love to see, in order to bring this to our attention, to really point it out, that it's the per capita death rate, not just the numbers, because the numbers are horrible enough. But if you looked at the per capita death rate of the city of Eugene and the city of Portland and rural or unincorporated Lane County, it would be a big difference, really big.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, I don't know that we have those specific numbers, but we can certainly work on those for the next report. I will tell you that all of the issues that you discussed, we talked about in terms of the automated enforcement. And you'll be interested to know that one of the criteria that's been added to this is that you have to objectively demonstrate by statistics that a particular road is dangerous. They have some criteria. So in other words, you can't just go set this up wherever you want. You actually have to have, people actually have a criteria.
Yeah.
Like on this particular road, we've had, 8 fatalities and 7 injuries. 90% of them were attributable to speed, for example, something like that. The other thing is that we've talked about the idea, a lot of times, a lot of the things that you see when we talk about automated enforcement, it really is intended to slow people down, not generate revenue. So for example, you're correct, we talked a lot about the new technology. One of the things are those signs that you see that flash your speed and flash red when you're speeding. One of the things that we discussed was you can put a fake camera on that because people think that they're being photographed and that they're going to get a speeding ticket, and it can slow them down. Very inexpensive way. We also talked about the fact that we wanted to do more than just simply send tickets in the mail. So one of the things we discussed with the sheriff's office, because again, taking pictures and doing that creates a whole other level of work. The suggestion was made that because this would have to require legislation, would be that it would authorize anyone who has retired with in good standing with the Oregon DPSST, Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, could review those tapes and issue tickets. Just as a way of not having a regular, kind of defeats the purpose to take a regular patrol deputy and have him sit in a room and look at hours and hours of video and then write a report and issue a ticket. But the other part of that is not just giving the person the ticket. The other part of it is the education. The other piece of this, letting the driver know what's going on, and you need a person to do that, not just send a ticket in the mail.
What's the plan, if any, for recommending that the board ask the legislature for authority to run cameras in Lane County?
I think that's in a very preliminary stage. You're right, there's a lot of issues that you have to go through to do that. And so I think we'd want to have a much more defined, we would want a very specific legislative concept where we would be going with statistics and we'd be saying these particular roads for this particular issue. But it doesn't, that's why we're talking about how are we going to make this work, because again, we have to find a way to staff it and a way to man it. We're not just going to go get it and also to buy the equipment.
Yeah. Do you know if the other jurisdictions that have received authority for this have defined in some way within their jurisdiction? In other words, like Portland, Beaverton, or if others have been added, or is it just legislature approves it and they can do something that
I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that there was discussion in this when we had this topic, and it's been in place long enough that there are some numbers that show that it does reduce, speed and does reduce the incidence of accidents.
Mm-hmm. I won't say one final question, but how are we doing on time? We behind or where are we?
We got a couple items before our 11 o'clock. We're all right.
All right, I'm just going to ask maybe one more question. With regard to setting up a camera on a county road where there's been and this would be, I would call it a kind of a test run or a project or a temporary or prototype. We've got a county road, lots of people have been killed, or at least a few people have been killed, lots of tickets, whatever, neighbors complaining. And we set up a camera with a speed sign, maybe a speed sign followed by a speed sign and a camera, and then reserve or or a retired officer looks at the tape and says, well, the person was speeding, I saw it on a tape, I saw it on the monitor, and they issue a citizen ticket for that person. First of all, do other jurisdictions do that? Has that been done by other people?
I don't know that other jurisdictions do that. I think they just mail the ticket.
Yeah, and we're in the exploratory phase right now. We want to pursue options at this point, and so we are doing more research about what other jurisdictions are doing and what legislative steps would be necessary, and if we were to pursue legislation, what are the specific things that we desire. So we do have our work cut out for us, but this input is helpful, and it'll shape our...
So the idea that we could do this independent of legislation, is that true?
No.
No. We have to, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lyken, then Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple things. First of all, I just really appreciate, again, the work that you're putting into this. I think it's really important work. The other thing is I want to make note is that because there's a fatality in rural Lane County does not mean that person lives in rural Lane County. That person could live in an urban area. And the other piece that I think that needs to be addressed is that distracted driving is real. And it's really, really causing significant harm because not only do you have the increased speed, then you have somebody who's texting on a winding road in Lane County. I don't know about you, but common sense does not enter the arena on that one. On the camera piece, and especially when you're looking more from a county perspective, I would highly suggest that Lane County work with Clackamas County on this. And the reason why is because Lane County and Clackamas County are number 1 and 2 in fatalities. And Clackamas County, like Lane County, Lane County is a little bit smaller than Clackamas County population, but you have the 4th and 3rd largest counties in the state. Plus, you have number 2 and number 3 as most county-owned roads or highways in the state. So Lane County is number 2 and Clackamas County is number 3. So there's a lot of similarities to there. And the person really, I think, from the board's perspective, their transportation guru is Commissioner Savas. And so who I would highly recommend you see if there's a potential to work with Clackamas County from not just the staff perspective, because I think the staff I'm going to guess there's probably open-mindedness, but from the political perspective, I think Paul's the right person to have that conversation with, as I've worked closely with him over the years on transportation issues, and in fact, I think he's taken my spot on the autonomous vehicle task force, and so that's my thought there. But again, you know, the speed is one thing, but the distracted driving issue is, and that's the one, you know, the rumble strips is really a great idea because if somebody's head's down, they're texting while they're, you know, coming up to that 45-mile-an-hour curb doing 70. The rumble strip then comes into place to, oh, well, I got to get my head up from texting and slow down while I'm coming up to this curve. And that's the thing. But I do want to make note that a fatality that happens in Lane County does not mean that's where the person lives. In fact, my guess is a lot of those fatalities probably are coming from the urban core out into the rural area, and they're not paying attention. And that's what's going on. But I think collaboration with Clackamas County would work well. We'll see where AOC is on that. But I would suggest because of there's been working relationships with Clackamas County anyway, on areas, I would recommend that. And now I know Jay and Pat know Paul, and I would really suggest you maybe just reach out to him in the first of the year and just ask if there's any appetite for that. And but I think by having the 3rd and 4th largest counties in the state work on this, especially with the amount of rural highways or rural miles that we have, or county miles that we have, as well as the number 1 and 2 in fatalities, I think that may be a good way to hopefully deal with this. So, but I really appreciate the work. It's kind of amazing on how much just the engineering, the technology, because, and I support the idea of the state highway, even though I think the number they threw out there is 40 more state highway patrol officers. It's a start. We're still a ways away. We'll see where revenue is on on some of the ONC stuff and also the work that Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo are doing in DC to see more revenue coming back here to Lane County. But I think rural patrol is going to be a tough one, and at least for the short term. Hopefully, in the long term, it'll work out well. But those are my 2 cents. But thank you for the great work.
Mr. Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be short-winded. But first thing I'd like to mention, Mr. Dingle, thank you for bringing Ms. Taylor today. And congratulations again on being named Public Employee of the Year recently by LCOG. It's always a pleasure to see you doing work, just based on the fact that you're very diligent about the work that you do. Thanks for this presentation. You know, everybody wants to obey the law, and I drive by Prairie Mountain School almost every single day, and there's a light there that tells me how fast I'm going. And every single time, every time, I check that light versus my speedometer, and it's always correct. And if I'm going 27 miles an hour, I slow down to 20. If I'm going 22 miles an hour, I slow down to 20, because I want to go 20, but I forget to. You know, I mean, I don't forget to, I just don't. So that being said, I believe people will respond to reminders, whether it's monetary reminders or just visual reminders. And if you combine the two, it's pretty impressive. You know, I was in the legislature too, not as long ago as Commissioner Sorensen, but I was in the legislature in 2003. We passed Senate Bill 764, which was the red light cameras. It allowed municipalities 30,000 or more to issue citations based on running red lights. And it stopped. It curbed people running red lights. I've not seen statistics on that since then. That was 2003, but I would imagine there's a little bit of a body of evidence to take a look at there as to how effective it is. Also recently, I drove over the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and I received a bill in the mail for my toll. So you know, these things are absolutely possible, and I would guess that the Golden Gate Bridge doesn't require constant monitoring by an individual to issue my $2.20 bill for the toll on the bridge. So I know we can do it, and I'm really highly in favor of this kind of a deterrent, because once again, most people want to obey the law. And if they know that there's a potential that they're going to get photographed while speeding, then they'll slow down. Even with fake cameras. You know, at Jerry's, we had a fake camera back when there were 8 of us working there. We had a piece of ABS tubing that looked like a camera. And for years, I thought it was a camera, and so did the shoppers. And it really is a visual, and it's a deterrent that people who want to obey the law will obey the law. So I'm once again highly in favor of it. Exploit it in any way that we can. I was in Tucson, Arizona, a number of times when our children were going to school down there, and they had speed violation cameras. Now, for some reason, they discontinued it, but the cameras were still there. And by gosh, even though I knew they were discontinued, the actual citations that were being offered, I slowed down every time I was going down that hill into Tucson from the national park. So, you know, it does work. Flashing lights do work. I've seen a number of studies that say people will slow down. So keep up the good work, Ms. Taylor. Once again, congratulations, and I'm looking forward to more work. And heartily, enthusiastically support the visual reminders for people that they are going too fast.
And I will say, in terms of fairness to one of the things that Commissioner Sorensen mentioned, you'll note that every place that does that has that type of photo enforcement, you're warned before you get there. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that before. It'll tell you that photo enforcement, you're coming into that area, which in and of itself has a deterrent effect.
And it slows you down. Yeah. One last thing, Commissioner Bozovich, I want to commend you on your work on Highway 126, identified as the most dangerous highway in Oregon. You spent quite a bit of time on the task force, and each time I drive on 126, the shortened passing lanes on uphill grades, and the rumble strips, and some of the various things that your task force put in place. Congratulations on that. Very well done.
Thank you, and soon to be a new passing area just west of Walton, so we'll hopefully get people to be not quite so impatient. So thank you, Becky, for the report, and Steve. I just a couple quick comments. One, I found it interesting that the photo that, as you were talking about driver ed, you looked at where the hand position was on the steering wheel. Most of us were taught 10 and 2, but that's changed over the years to 9 and 3 because of airbags. Oh. And so yeah, because one of the most common injuries in an airbag deployment is a broken nose. Think about it. If you have your hand on the steering wheel, that airbag pops and it's up in the top, you're going to punch yourself right in the face. That's why they've changed it to 9 and 3, which, kind of, as you think about people going back in, maybe some older folks going back in to become driver ed, the reason they need the state training is even though you may have driven for 40 years, it's changed. Cars have changed and operating vehicles has changed. I will note that our former state representative and labor commissioner-elect was the victim of an accident on a county roadway on Thanksgiving Day out outside of Springfield here recently, and has contacted me about some of her concerns about some of our roadways and safety out there. So we have a state elected official that is concerned about rural Lane County roadway safety at this time. So, as we think about lobbying efforts and maybe looking at photo radar as a possible solution, we do have allies up there at the State House, and the incoming Labor Secretary may be one of those people that can connect us with folks as well as the folks at Clackamas. I will note that while Clackamas and us have similar traffic fatality issues, road miles, and populations, there's a huge dissimilarity between us in their permanent rate, the fact that they do have a public safety district and an enhanced law enforcement district in their rural areas. So their rural patrol presence is actually much greater than ours in a lot of ways. So there is that one disparity between us and Clackamas is just in their ability to fund law enforcement. So, but I do think it is worth looking into some initial discussions about photo radar. I hope, though, that at least we don't get where red light enforcement got to when it first came in, which was companies that were contracting with cities were promising a certain amount of revenue, and they were actually decreasing the yellow light times to entrap people basically into running red lights to increase their revenues. That I think has been resolved through some legislation where they can't change the yellow light timing. In fact, what was found is if you increase the yellow light timing slightly, you actually eliminate as much red light running almost as red light enforcement does.
That was in Senate Bill 764, 2003.
Yeah. So, we have to be careful when we get to these things, how we put them in place. But I think, as I just came from a trip to England, you want to talk about photo radar enforcement. It's all over there. But it is definitively warned about in advance of where they have zones that they do it. There's signs all over the place. And what was very interesting is being on the highways in England, they move very uniformly as far as, the differential in speed from the right lane to the left lane, because there it's opposite. The right lane's the fast lane, is not really that great. You don't see, 30 miles an hour difference in traffic.
It's because they all drive 90.
maybe about 5 or 10, and it's mostly because of some of the lorries that can't pull the hills. So, how's that?
Good job.
So, I would be interested in having that conversation maybe about a legislative initiative around that, because I do think with our lack of rural patrol, that may be one of the tools in our toolbox to look at changing driver behaviors. So, any further comments on that report? If none, then I'm going to try and sneak in for our 11 o'clock time certain a radio issue, so our immensely patient staffer, Mr. Harmon, has been here since the beginning, hoping we would slip him in somewhere. So I'm going to try and slip that in, which is item 8A, which is order 181205, in the matter of accepting Motorola proposal for the IP Simulcast G Series upgrade ASR sites and subscriber add-on in the amount of $3,639,984 and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the purchase order and contract. Wow, that's a big number, Mr. Harmon.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair Bozovich and commissioners, for your time this morning. I'm Michael Harmon. I am the
system manager for the Lane Radio Interoperability Group. This is the radio system that supports primary operations for public safety and public works for Lane County, the cities of Eugene and Springfield, and eWeb. The LRIG system also provides radio services to other public agencies, and today we support over 2,000 individual subscriber radios, the mobile radios in the cars and the portables that they carry, from 24 different agencies that span federal, state, and local units of government. I am here today to present and request approval to accept the Motorola proposal that is before you, and I'll try to break it down and make it sound a little bit more like English and a little bit less technical. What we're doing is upgrading the simulcast system in the metropolitan area and replacing a number of older base radios that are on the radio system out on the hilltops in various places. And we had an opportunity to bundle that upgrade with the purchase of new subscriber radios for the Lane County Sheriff's Department and also for the city of Springfield. And we're able to negotiate a better price by bundling those together. So if you look at that $3.6 million contract, roughly $1.8 million of that is for subscriber radios for the Lane County Sheriff's Department. Those will be paid for from existing funds in the Lane County Sheriff's budget. They're replacing them a little bit early in exchange for a pretty significant discount. Another roughly $500,000, $528,000, is for similar for subscriber radios for the Springfield Police Department, and that amount will be paid for entirely by the city of Springfield. And again, they negotiated that price themselves. The remaining $1.28 million is for the actual radio system upgrade. And what that will entail is replacing 27 of the older base radios, which are called Quantars, on hilltops. We have 6 locations here in the metro area that all work together as one site. They're tied together. It's called simulcast. I like to think of it as a kind of a stereo system. It improves in-building coverage for the radios pretty significantly. And then 2 remote sites. One is Bear Mountain near Cottage Grove, and the other is Mount Hagen up near Vida. Those 8 physical locations are the original size of the radio system. Those are the original sites on the system, and some of the equipment on there is approaching 20 years old. So it is time for us to just replace that to keep it current. All of our other sites, we have 6 other sites across the county, were built with newer equipment, and so they don't require the equipment upgrade at this time. So it's a hardware replacement. There's site controllers and gateways and things like that up there, as well as upgrading the software in the metro area so that it's migrating away from the old circuit-based technology, and everything, like everything else, is going full IP. So there'll be some technical work there. In addition, we're adding 1 additional channel for capacity on Bear Mountain, which is down by Cottage Grove. The Cottage Grove Police Department's come on recently, and that's been good. And funding for the roughly $1.3 million that is the radio system upgrade, that funding is being split between the 6 voting LRIG members. That's been on their radar since about 2014. We've known this is coming for a while, so folks have been saving their reserve funding for it. All the partners have agreed to the timeline that we're proposing, which is entering a contract now, using 2019 to do some highly technical planning work, and then implementing early in 2020. And all of the partners have agreed to make their contribution towards this $1.3 million as part of the FY20 budget cycle. And so with your approval today, we'll begin that significant planning effort during 2019. We may implement some of the less technical pieces of the work, some of the easier outlying stuff. And then the metro area is being planned for its upgrade early in calendar 2020. And what's significant about that is we plan our radio system upgrades around significant community events. So we want to get this work started now so that we have the radio system upgraded and stable. We don't want to be doing any work on it during the Olympic trials in 2020, and certainly want to have the work done before the 2021 World Games. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Farr.
I have a question on page 93 of the supporting document. No, no questions.
Mr. Sorensen.
In the radio interoperability world, was there any learning curve on the fire in the campfire near Chico, California? Did those radios work? Was that a problem in the response to the fire? Anything learned from that?
That event is so recent, we really have not had a chance to talk about how their communications went. We look all the time at how radio systems perform during hurricanes on the East Coast, and actually more relevant to us are the hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico a few years ago, because that actually moved the ground around and knocked over some of their systems. So yes, when we go out to these sites, part of what we do is a site assessment to make sure that they're not as vulnerable to fires. We keep the ground very clear. We study and do engineering studies on the towers and manufacture that equipment so that it can withstand fires and hopefully earthquakes within reason.
Okay, and since we are in an earthquake-prone region and we've had major earthquakes more recently, you know, on the Ring of Fire, what is the impact of earthquakes on radio interoperability?
So our system is designed to work with all the sites working together. They're also built in a network, and this is part of why everything's moving to IP, so that if we lose connections or if we lose an entire site, the rest of the system can fill in for coverage areas and continue to operate with what we have left.
Thank you.
So I will note that, you know, this is really an important piece of work when we think about resilience for the Cascadia subduction zone event or wildfire. You know, one of the first things that happens, you know, everyone goes, you know, why are we investing in radios? Everybody's carrying a cell phone around. First thing that happens in natural disaster is this, you know, one, if the cell phone systems are even up, two, they're usually overwhelmed. By everybody trying to get in contact with everybody else, you know, trying to reassemble families and you know, everything else that goes on after a natural disaster. This operates, you know, completely separate. And if you look at the geography of Lane County, cell phone service is not always there for some areas. You know, you get out into areas where we need to still provide, you know, police services out into, you know, the areas out past Alma and all that. You do not get cell phone signal, you know, out there. But you guys need to be able to have radios, so that's why you have all these hilltop locations and be able to reach down in some of these. Even then, it's challenging in some places to get full radio coverage. But I really appreciate the upgrade because it's part of that. You know, first of all, 20 years is ancient when it comes to technology. We all know, you know, 5 to 7 years is really old. So 20 years is pretty old you know, for technology. I'm sure that there's a lot of improvements in the circuitry and circuit boards and the resilience just in the hardware portions of the system, let alone the software side. But I really appreciate that this is going to help us be more resilient in Lane County. So if there's no further comments, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of Order 181205 in the matter of accepting Motorola Proposal IP Simulcast G-Series Upgrade ASR sites and subscriber add-on in the amount of $3,639,984 and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the purchase order and contract.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And thank you for your patience this morning. Yeah, with that, we're going to jump to our time certain item because we are right on 11 o'clock here, and move to item 9C, which is Order 1812-0407 in the matter of revising the 2017-2019 Community Corrections Grant and Aid and Justice Reinvestment Grant Program budgets and delegating authority to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, Criminal Justice Planner to sign and submit Justice Reinvestment Grant revision forms online and to complete and submit the Community Corrections Biennial Plan Modifications Form, and to the County Administrator to amend intergovernmental agreements and contracts. And we have Paul Solomon, our Chair of our Public Safety Coordinating Council, and Susan Sowards, our Planner for the Public Safety Coordinating Council from LCOG. So, welcome.
Thank you. Chair Bozovich, Commissioners, we are here today, as you noted, to amend the Grant and Aid and Justice Reinvestment Grant Program budgets. Before we get into the detail, I just want to note that these budgets over the past couple of biennia have become much more complex. We have more programs funded. Historically, we would meet annually to make mid-course corrections. We are currently, the Budget Committee is meeting quarterly because of the changes in timing with starting new programs, some programs not utilizing all the funding. So we're here near the end of the biennium, or well into the second year, to make what hopefully will be our last amendment to the budget. So with that, I want to turn it over to Ms. Sowards to give a little background, and then I'll talk a little bit about the actual budget changes.
Thank you, Paul. The Budget Committee, as Paul said, is beginning to meet quarterly, and actually by February it'll probably meet more frequently than that as it begins to develop the budget for the next biennium, in addition to revising this one. They met, the last time they met was October 10th, and Commissioner Bozovich is chair of that Budget Committee, and they met and developed the recommendations. They looked at expenditures starting July 1, 2017 through September 30th of 2018, and looked at where money was or was not being spent, where the needs were that needed to be filled, if money was to be reprogrammed, and literally worked through the dollars in the sense as I was live on the screen behind me trying to like type in the numbers and as we moved along. But it's actually over time become just a really incredible collaborative process among the disparate people around the table who represent different components of the system. And they worked together very well. So they came to 100% agreement on the budget that we're bringing to you today. It then went forward to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, which adopted the recommendations on November 1st, also unanimously. And so they come to you with full approval of your recommending bodies. And it's about, the total budgets are right around $30 million for the biennium. So that's the other reason it's become, the budget thankfully has grown, and it's become even more critical to meet frequently.
So with that, if we could turn to page 3 of the packet, you will find under item D, the financial resource considerations. You will see that there were project funds that hadn't been fully expended, and what we did was we took a look at projections based on utilization over the first year plus to see what we thought would be the total utilization for every line item in the budget. And what we found was that there was lower utilization than we had anticipated in a few areas, including the behavioral health and medication treatment program that was operated by Lane County Behavioral Health through a partnership with sponsors in Lane County Parole and Probation. The offender reentry treatment program, and there was a little bit of an offset there where we had one treatment program that was operated by Emergence that was underutilized and another that was overutilized. And then we had the CCC renovation line item that had been put in for the sheriff's office to when parole and probation eventually moves out of the CCC to begin the renovation process. And as it's become clear that parole and probation is not likely to move prior to the end of the biennium, we decided to pull that from this year's budget, but with an agreement that that would be a priority in the 1921 budget. Additionally, the Sheriff's Office stepped up and offered an additional $64,000 from the Sherman Center, their GED program that hadn't been fully utilized as well. And that's in the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program, whereas all the other items were in the Grant and Aid program, the community corrections dollars. So the next table down shows where we reallocated the money. $55,000 went to Emergence for their Endeavor program that had higher utilization. $9,000 went to crisis funding for sponsors, and this is actually money that's available to parole and probation. They approve for crisis-related necessary items like bus passes and ID, clothing for work for people on supervision. Additionally, the RLAN program is a joint project between Lane County Parole and Probation, sponsors, and the Sheriff's Office, where we take people who are coming out of DOC custody 2 months prior to their transitional leave date or their projected release date, where they spend 60 days at the Work Release Center at the Sheriff's Office and then transition to sponsors and get wraparound services while they're at the CCC. This has been a very successful program that we wanted to ensure that we were able to continue funding, because in February we were going to have to turn off the lights because we had fully utilized all of the funding for the program to that point. Additionally, we allocated funding, and additionally, actually, the RLAN services paid for funding for both the Sheriff's Office and sponsors. And then finally, $5,000 in the 416 program for transitional housing. Any questions about any of these budget items? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Howard, Mr. Solomon. I had a question regarding behavioral health medication treatment being reduced.
Yeah.
Now, my basic question there is that as a board, we spend a lot of time working on behavioral health issues and reallocating money into behavioral health services. Right. And it's kind of odd to see it being reduced by $100,000 because of usage lower than anticipated. I think I know the answer, because the money's been reallocated to RLAN, which is absolutely an appropriate reallocation. Could you just talk about that a little bit? $100,000 removed from behavioral health medication treatment and reallocated elsewhere.
Yeah, Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Farr. So what we did there was we had started a program this biennium in partnership with sponsors, Lane County Behavioral Health and Parole and Probation, to set up an outpatient site at sponsors. And from the beginning, we had challenges with getting the right staff and then them being able to provide kind of the necessary services. And as it turned out, there was not appropriate utilization. And at the same time, Sponsors was in the process of starting a mental health program that's funded by Medicaid dollars. So we've replaced it with a program that actually has broader utilization and doesn't cost the county anything.
I knew there was a good explanation, and you just provided one. Thank you. So really, you're spending the same amount of money on behavioral health services. Right. Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
I'm just interested in what the what this recommendation has to do with the courthouse planning, and whether the commission has made recommendations on the courthouse project or not.
Commissioner Sorensen, Chair Bozovich, this budget has really nothing to do with the courthouse. I would say that at the last meeting, we had a presentation by Judge Zanache, DA Perlow, and Chief Deputy Harold about the courthouse project, and there's broad support from the PSCC, but this is not an area that is all tied to the courthouse.
Okay. And will the Public Safety Coordinating Council make a recommendation about the courthouse?
We would certainly entertain making a
Yeah, I think you should, because the judges are asking questions about it of the board. The staff, our staff has had a lot to do with the planning process, and I think that a recommendation from the Public Safety Coordinating Council will be good.
So I just, if I can step in here. So we just, what was it, last Thursday? Days are flying by.
Yeah.
We had a work group meeting, which is a subcommittee of the Public Safety Coordinating Council, and we are re-upping the 10-year public safety plan more broadly to include more than just Lane County entities. If you remember, we did that. It focused mostly on the Sheriff's Department and Lane County entities like, youth services. As part of that broadening, it's going to include the courts. And I believe in their work, that part of the work plan, it's going to talk about the courthouse replacement. And that work plan will go through the full Public Safety Coordinating Council to be recommended for adoption by the board. So that, we'll see, we're going to see something about the court. We've expanded that work, that public safety plan to include the courts, to include Kids First and some other entities that weren't included in the first version of it. So it's more broadly reflecting the entire public safety system versus just Lane County's pieces of the public safety system. So I think that's coming. It's in a different venue and part of how the Public Safety Coordinating Council operates. I think it'll be as part of the work plan, similar to our strategic plan. You'll see a recommendation on the courthouse replacement.
It's actually under both the DA's item and the courts, because it's so pertinent to both of them, since they're shoved into little offices.
The DA is having an issue right now with not having enough space. In fact, there's one workstation that's actually serving 4 people right now in the DA's office, and they have to kind of rotate who comes in and uses it.
Chair Bozovich, if I may, I think it's also important to note, as we are considering supporting state funding efforts coming out of Lane County, that the governor's recommended budget shortchanged the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program and the Community Corrections allocation. So while Lane County has done a lot to stabilize our system and increase our share of the pie, we are actually anticipating a larger percentage allocation. The pie currently is shrinking. So I think it's going to take some effort from all of our public safety partners and certainly our elected officials with folks in Salem to ensure that both of those funding streams are fully funded.
Yeah, it is really a critical item because we have done such great work with these 2 funding streams. As you can kind of see just in the items we're right now going to handle with this budget adjustment, we're dealing with, addiction and treatment. We're dealing with folks in crisis that are on supervision. But one of the main things we're doing with this money and the changes in it is this program of transitioning folks out of prison into society and doing that transition early in a much more deliberative way, which is the success rate of that particular program has been incredible. And it shows, if you go to the Criminal Justice Commission has a dashboard on their website. And one of the first graphs on the dashboard is just kind of this red-green bar chart of every county across the state of how we're doing in changing our prison usage. And Lane County is way over on the left side as one of the good counties, as the 3rd best county in reduction in prison month usage as far as and per capita. And it's a pretty incredible thing, that we're there and doing such great work. And part of it is those funding streams for community corrections and justice reinvestment grant are funding all these programs, restorative justice programs, and we're utilizing them for pieces of our funding for drug court. We're utilizing them for these kind of transitional programs, but it's really making a difference in recidivism here in Lane County, which ultimately saves everybody money. And the fact that the governor's recommended budget had a 4% decrease in community corrections funding from last year's budget, and the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program also was far less than the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program was in the last biennium. The combination of those two, even if we get a bigger piece of the pie, we're probably still looking at cuts to all of these programs that have been so successful. And we need to be full court press up in Salem to change those funding requests. I will say this has been par for the course from this governor, and over the last biennium also did not recommend very strong budgets in both these areas. And fortunately, the legislature, overruled and changed the budgets and gave us higher budgets. It's really critical in community corrections because we've actually had a time study done that shows that the budget last year, it does not really even reflect the actual cost of providing community corrections. There actually needs to be a really significant increase in the Community Corrections Act funding to actually fund the true cost of what it takes to serve that population that's under supervision. So I thank you for reminding us of those items. With that, I'll turn to the board if there are any other questions on the budget revisions for the Community Corrections Grant and Aid and Justice Reinvestment Grant Programs. Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion on Order 1812-0407. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of Order 1812-0407, the matter of revising the 2017-19 Community Corrections Grant and Aid and Justice Reinvestment Grant Program budgets and delegating authority to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, Criminal Justice Planner to sign and submit JRGP revision forms online and to complete and submit the Community Corrections Biennial Plan Modification Form and to the County Administrator to amend intergovernmental agreements and contracts.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve Order 1812-0407. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Farr.
Just briefly, at every chance I get, I'd like to commend you, Mr. Solomon, on the work that your agency sponsors does. There really is nothing like it that I've seen anyplace else, not just in the state, but nationally. And when Commissioner Bozovich talks about Lane County's high rate of success regarding recidivism, bravo to sponsors and bravo to the work you do with the men and women who come through your program. Thank you.
Agreed. Further discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
So that gets us on to going back a little bit to county administration announcements. Mr. Mokohiski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of items I want to update the board on here today. I know we have executive session that we're going to try to get to this morning. So, what do you want?
We're going to do that this afternoon.
This afternoon. Okay, good. So we have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
The first thing I'd like to update the board on. So 3 primary items here before I get lost. Let me just say the 3 things. I want to give an update on the Highway 99 camp, where we're at on that, and some announcements we're making today on that. I want to update you on the Association of Oregon Counties budget and transfer of funds that we've discussed with the board, and then a brief discussion on United Way. So the first item, an update, as the board knows, in October, we opened a temporary camp for around 100 individuals who were, at the time, camping at the Butterfly Lot in downtown Eugene. Commissioner Sorensen mentioned this morning, a county-owned property, 1.5 acres, and we took about a 1/4 acre and set that up as a temporary camp. And we said at the time, this is a temporary camp that we want to make available for 30 to 60 days until we determine transition process there. So I want to provide an update to the board. I think as the board certainly knows, because we've talked about this a lot, camping is not the ultimate solution to homelessness. And so our focus in Lane County has really been on, creating a pathway for individuals that are experiencing homelessness with an eye towards permanent housing. That really the investments we want to make, Commissioner Farr made this point this morning, the investments we want to make are in permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, and getting people into those long-term sustainable solutions. So we identified this camp on Highway 99 as a temporary solution because we believe that it was, and I think it's turned out to be better than the camping that was occurring on the Butterfly Lot or individuals that might be camping along the river or in other locations throughout the community. We recognize, though, that better still than a sort of informally structured temporary sanctioned camp is a location for individuals to be that is safer and healthier, that has heat there, and that is the Dusk to Dawn model that's been really successful with St. Vincent de Paul's. There's 115 beds available at this Dusk to Dawn site north Highway 99, 25 individuals from Camp 99, from the original 100 individuals who were moved to that Camp 99, 25 of those individuals have actually moved over to the Dusk to Dawn operation and are part of those 105. That's been a really successful model. It's full. The Dusk to Dawn on Highway 99 North is full, 115 beds, and so we're looking at that. So better than the temporary camp is something that is more structured and a proven model that has been run through the Dusk to Dawn. Better still than Dusk to Dawn is a public shelter with a roof and heat and services provided on a campus. Better still is permanent supportive housing with connection to services that meet all of the needs of individuals that are experiencing homelessness, oftentimes substance abuse issues, mental health issues, individuals that traditionally are very difficult to house in affordable housing, even if they may have housing vouchers available. They're difficult to house because of the other issues that they're facing. So investments in permanent supportive housing are better still than a public shelter. And better still than permanent supportive housing is affordable housing, a job, and self-sufficiency. So you see this pathway that we're really working to develop. So I just want to say all that as a setup to, we recognize that sanctioned camps are maybe a very initial point of entry onto that pathway, but they are not the ultimate solution to that end the cycle of homelessness. So you heard this morning, both from individuals at the camp and from some of the businesses. Again, we believe that it's been a positive solution to a less structured and challenging situation for health and safety that was happening downtown. But the current camp still does not provide the infrastructure or management support necessary to ensure health and safety of individuals. So I'll update you kind of on what that transition plan looks like, but I wanted to let the board know that we are actively evaluating the county-owned site on Highway 99 north of Roosevelt as a potential for a future low-barrier public shelter. We believe that it has the property has some benefits. It's about 1.5 acres. There are 2 buildings, existing structures on the county-owned property. There's a third parcel and building that is privately owned and leased that also could be interesting if it could be acquired. And what we're contemplating is the potential of a campus that actually, Mr. Solomon is left here, but I think very fitting that we heard from sponsors. If you look across the street just south of this property on Highway 99 is the sponsor's property. It's one of the most pristine, well-kept, respectable facilities there that houses ex-offenders coming out of the prison system and re-entering into the community. It's a model nationally and certainly in our community for how we can develop campuses that serve the needs of individuals, in the case of sponsors re-entering into a community, or in the case of homeless individuals that are trying to lift up into a better situation. So we're using these thoughts around how others in our community and around the country are developing structured, accountable campuses that serve all of the needs. Currently, this camp that exists does not serve all of the needs. So we're looking at that. We're working with our partners at the City of Eugene, who've been actively involved in these discussions, as well as others, to determine the existing building conditions, site opportunities and constraints, as well as working with businesses and residents in the surrounding area. We're doing outreach today with businesses. We're meeting with the campers today at that site and talking about our plans there. So I wanted to lay all of that out. There's been a lot of interest in the Highway 99 property, and we feel that we have a lot of work to do to evaluate and answer a number of questions, but we feel like it is a viable enough opportunity for us to pursue further. Our goal is to generate enough information and answer enough questions that we can present to the Board of Commissioners and the Eugene City Council on January 22nd at your joint elected official meeting, at which you will hear the final report from the Technical Assistance Collaborative, the TAC that is often referred to, the Housing and Homelessness Report. That really was the beginning of us quantifying exactly what we need. That report has said a 50 to 75 bed low barrier public shelter is needed. And so we're going to look at this this facility to develop an accountable system and campus that may provide food and shelter, as well as connection to mental and physical health services and housing and workforce services. All of those things are key to creating an accountable system that ultimately ends homelessness, as well as a pathway into permanent housing. So I want to share all of that. That's the big picture. That's the long-term solution from the shelter component that we're seeking. These temporary camps and even the Dusk to Dawn model that St. Vincent de Paul has done a great job of developing and implementing, those are still temporary. You heard from the technical assistants and from our staff at the last joint elected official meeting that even tents are not viewed as shelter. So we're really looking at creating that permanent supportive, or that permanent public shelter need. So more to come on that in the course of the next month. In the short term, we will be working, we are working with St. Vincent de Paul, with the campers, with the businesses in the surrounding area to transition the current camp to an 80-bed Dusk to Dawn operation that will open in early January of 2019. This, we believe, will improve the infrastructure and management support that's needed, provide a more sustainable and safe shelter opportunity that includes heating. So as the temperatures have dropped here to freezing level and the Egan warming centers are being reactivated, we also recognize that sleeping in a cold tent is not the ideal situation. The Dusk to Dawn operation run by St. Vincent de Paul will provide larger heated tents, greater accessibility for individuals with disabilities, as well as connections to resources and services. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen there, integrating individuals with services at the Lindholm Center. We're going to be doing targeted outreach to the vulnerable populations within the camp to make sure that they have access to services. We're doing a social and health triage survey to identify the needs of the individual campers and connect them to the services. A veterinary clinic for pets is planned. Health education and vaccination efforts. All of these things are going to happen as we transition to this more structured Dusk to Dawn operation in early January. I think that is everything that I wanted to say on the Camp 99 transition. I mentioned that 25 individuals have moved over to Dusk to Dawn, so we've actually seen a migration from the current camp to that. I Again, I'll say that, and I believe that currently, I've not been out to the site in a few days, but there is striping happening across Highway 99. The City of Eugene and has done great work working with our partners at the state to get a safe crosswalk installed there for individuals. And that's really critical because the connection to the Lindholm Center and the several meals a day that are provided 7 days a week, laundry services, charging stations, showers, and everything are there. So I'm going to stop on that. I have two other items, but if there are questions or comments you'd like to make on the Camp 99 transition and our effort to look at a long-term future location for a permanent low-barrier shelter.
Commissioner Farr, or Sorensen, sorry.
So really none of this has been decided by the board, really. This is something that you're continuing to work on, and I'm just want to say I'm supportive of, but we do know that there are many challenges with how we would afford to do all this. And I'm still not clear, even though I'm supportive of what was done earlier regarding Highway 99, what the funding base was for that and how long the funding for that will continue. So how would you reconcile the need to move ahead and do what we can do when we did not discuss this at all in our budget process, and it's something that needed to be done, but I'd like to just reconcile with, well, what's the next step?
Very good questions. You're right, Commissioner Sorensen. There have been no decisions. There have been no decisions by the Board of Commissioners.
Well, there have been decisions.
Yes,
to
on this matter. Yes, absolutely. In terms of, there's been no decision, final decision about the use of the property or what investments need to be made there. All of those decisions will come. What I'm telling you today is that we're actively evaluating the feasibility of this site for a future public shelter because we know that's a need. We know that it's been recommended in the TAC report to the board and to the Eugene City Council. And so we're going to do what we can do. We are working to evaluate all of those questions and answer, land use and zoning related issues, facility condition related issues, how would a campus flow, how much would it cost to do the repairs that would be required and the renovations that would be required to open a shelter. So we're working on all those questions, and our hope is to have as many of them answered by the January 22nd joint elected official meeting, and then there are subsequent decisions that would have to be made by both bodies as it relates to that. We know that the City of Eugene has set aside $1 million in their budget, and the city manager and I have been in conversations, as commissioners have been in conversations with counselors, and we've talked in public meetings about that. City Council has been committed to and understands the need for a public shelter. So the city has set aside some resources for that. We own the property, so it seems as though we've checked a couple of boxes in terms of what is going to be critical in moving forward with this. So there are going to be additional resources that will need to be identified. I think it's an interesting question to say to what extent would our partners in the private and nonprofit sectors be interested and willing to step up and support that. We know in our our permanent supportive housing project on MLK Boulevard, we have some incredible public and nonprofit organizations that have supported that work. So this is all of these solutions are not going to come from Lane County. They're not going to come from a city. They're not going to come from an individual private or nonprofit organization. It's going to come from all of us in our community stepping forward and saying, what do we need to do to solve this challenge? Last week, Commissioner Sorensen handed me a report from 1970. When was that? It was 20 plus years old. And it was starting to turn brown because the paper was so old. How to end homelessness in Lane County, a task force that was put together in the late 70s. I believe, or early 80s. So this is not a new issue. We haven't solved it yet, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort and resources to solve it, but I think that there is clearly a catalyst in our community. The time is ripe for us to move and begin to put things in place that are solutions for our entire community, that everyone can get behind. Whether it's individuals that are experiencing homelessness, advocates for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, the nonprofit organizations that serve them, the governments that have responsibility. for identifying solutions. The private sector that is concerned about these issues, both from a human standpoint and from a business perspective. So that's what we're trying to do here. In terms of the financial question, we're going to have that conversation. But we need to identify first what are the investments that need to be made, both from a capital investment standpoint as well as from an operations standpoint. So we're working to answer all those questions, and then we'll start to bring those answers and some potential solutions to you and to other policymakers for decisions in the near future.
Commissioner Farr?
I'll be brief because we are a little bit short on time, but I just want to mention that on that day in late October, when over the course of about 6 hours, we opened what is a low barrier shelter. It was a pretty amazing turn of events that made that happen, and it helped us to realize that things change on a daily basis, and Lane County can be responsive on very, very short notice. But when we established that camp, it was a 30 to 60 day temporary camp. We knew that the infrastructure wasn't going to be adequate to support a long-term camp. We also knew the management structure was not going to be adequate to support a long-term camp, and that's why we're seeking help from our partners and from private industry to look for what are the longer-term solutions. And the Highway 99 location is a good location because of its adjacency to services. However, it is once again burdening the Bethel-Danabo neighborhood, as we have through the years, both as a city and as a county, burdening the neighborhood with services. Now, the neighborhood is responding in certain ways, but really, Commissioner Sorensen, it's important to know that as we locate replacement places for people to stay, we have to look at all parts of our community, not just Bethel-Danabo, not just River Road, but South Eugene. You know, South Eugene really doesn't do very much in terms of allowing location of camps or temporary or semi-permanent housing situations. As we move to the St. Vincent de Paul's model of dusk to dawn, that is communal living. Communal living works in many situations, and it does address the most dire needs in terms of nutrition, in terms of warmth, in terms of shelter, but it doesn't address the needs of some people who simply cannot, for whatever reason, live in communal living. As we look at alternate sites beyond dusk to dawn, that is when it becomes a little bit more dicey, a little bit more of a delicate balance with the community and with the folks who are living in shelters that are not communal shelters. And it's when, Commissioner Sorensen, we do have to look at all parts of Eugene and, in fact, all parts of our metropolitan area, because this is where the services are, to locate places in smaller camps that are easier to provide a management structure, easier to provide an infrastructure to have people live in situations that aren't communal living. Communal living works for a lot of people. Doesn't work for some people, and we are noticing that, we're recognizing that. And as I stated earlier, our learning curve has been very steep in terms of how to address in innovative ways the living situation of people who require, demand, and need different living situations. Not too long ago, we would look out of that window and there were campers on the Butterfly parking lot. When they were relocated from the Butterfly parking lot to the Bethel-Danabo area, it wasn't only the folks from the the Butterfly parking lot that were located there. It was people who were in impromptu camps throughout the local area that were moved to the temporary low barrier shelter. So, Mr. Mokrahajski, you've explained very well the decisions that we're making ongoing and the dynamics of the decisions that we're making, that it changes on a regular basis as we recognize new ways to provide services to people who really need and demand different kinds of services. So well done in coordinating with the City of Eugene, with other partners, and your staff has done a remarkable job of working extra hours to make sure that things do happen in ways that they really have never happened before. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, thank you for bringing up with the one item that I failed to mention that we are also actively working on. City staff, county staff are working to identify additional locations for some additional rest stops. So that is part of this effort to say, yes, there is a need for communal living, shelter solutions. There's also, doesn't necessarily meet all of the needs that are out there, and so identifying locations for one or two additional rest stops is also on the table through this effort. Again, it's all geared towards developing this pathway that recognizes that, you know, the camping is not going to be the solution to get folks out. I think about Eric DeBurr, who some of you know, who he and his wife Faye run community supportive shelters and manage a couple of the city's rest stops. And he's oftentimes talked about the tension between comfort and discomfort, and the fact that these rest stops and his design of the Conestoga huts, he was the one who designed these Conestoga huts. The design was really based around recognizing that those help to keep individuals safer and more sheltered than sleeping in a tent on the street, but they're also not the end solution. That you want to get people into those Conestoga huts, but then also have this tension between comfort and discomfort where they're intended to move you into a more permanent supportive housing or affordable housing model. And so we need to think about these solutions as each solution as a pathway to the next step up. And so that's what all of this is geared towards. And additional rest stops is going to be a part of this transition process. Our end goal is to make sure that all of the individuals at the current Camp 99 have a place to be as this transition occurs, and then that we're making solutions available for all of the rest of the individuals that are experiencing homelessness in our community.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Interesting. So you look at the late 70s, early 80s, double-digit unemployment rate, double-digit interest rates. People thrown out of their homes. Leading into the Great Recession, no job, no income, no problem. We'll give you 100% financing on your house anyway. People then lost their homes, back out. I think the biggest challenge that Lane County will face, and then, you know, we've seen this before, and we've looked at these numbers today. Lane County residents have about $10,000 a year less buying power than they did in 1970. So you think about that on an annual income. Those are facts. In 1980, Lane County was the second largest county in the state. We're fourth. And when it comes to another economic blow, unfortunately, I don't know where Lane County will be. It'll be a struggle. Right now, as we saw in the Great Recession, Washington County was able to sustain that. Clackamas County and Multnomah County, so the three counties up north were able to sustain any sort of major economic crisis. Lane County, I'm not sure. So when you look into the future and what's going to happen, you know, I still get concerned that I'm not sure we're positioned correctly from an economic development perspective. And we don't really have somebody in that place. Setcor, just up north of us, just hired Eric Anderson. And I don't know if people remember Eric, but Eric used to work for Governor Kulongoski. Went up, did economic development for Tacoma Public Utility up there. He's now going to run economic development in Marion County. Boy, it's going to be a challenge. And I say that because this issue, the economy and what's going on with housing are linked. And I brought this up a few months ago. And again, our land use system here makes it a little bit more trying in other states. But when in Utah, they were looking at housing issues, and because that is happening, but it's happening for other reasons. Because the economy is exploding, they literally, and housing costs are going up so high that when people moving in, it's becoming unaffordable. So they put together a task force, and who's heading up the task force? The owner of the Utah Jazz. Okay? Who in Oregon is stepping up from the private sector with that kind of leadership and that kind of capability to say we have a housing crisis here, we need to deal with this? Not just because of what's going on with homelessness, but it's the employment housing crisis. If we really want to attract employees to come here, we've got to have housing. Otherwise, it's going to be a big, big challenge. And unfortunately, the leader of what's going on seems to be government. And instead of those in the private sector, I got to tell you, I was really taken aback when you look at that, and it's the owner and the family that owns the Utah Jazz are leading the housing task force and are the leading voice on creating more housing in Utah. That's not happening here. And so as you go out into the next year, I would just highly ask that the board really engage especially our local private sector leadership. We know who they are. I'm not talking about the local members of the Chamber of Commerce. We know who the 20, 25 folks out there that are the giants in the private sector are. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce is kind of a club. Most of those folks really don't even belong or are active in the Chamber of Commerce, but they're the major employers in our community. That's who we need to be engaged with here on housing. And also to talk about the homeless issue is an issue that can affect what's going to happen in the future private sector as well. So, I mean, all of that is linked. It's linked together. And unfortunately, I don't think we talk enough about that aspect of it on the economic development, the employment aspect of it, and what that can mean to help curb this. We don't talk enough about that, and we should. And so leading into the next year, I'm hoping that this board will be much more engaged than that. I don't think you're going to see that from the Eugene City Council. I'm sorry. I think this board will have to take the lead on that. I think Mayor Lundberg is willing to be right there with you, no doubt about it. But don't expect it to come from this council here in Eugene. I don't expect that to happen. So that's my thought on this overall. It's a good conversation to have, but I think we have to have the conversation needs to get so much broader and so much stronger and what that means from the economy standpoint, because one more blow to the economy, unfortunately, that's going to put more pressure on the homeless issue because of just where we are in wages, incomes, and just on the overall crisis on housing as it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further questions for the administrator on his report back on the Camp 99? I just want to note quickly, as I took office in 2011, the big discussion then was whether we could afford $30,000 to keep the Egan warming centers running. You know, and that was our winter homeless strategy, period, was the Egan warming centers. And there wasn't any other dusk to dawn systems. There wasn't, you know, a real coordinated interagency, across the board winter strategy. That's changed over the years. We actually have a coordinated winter strategy system to the point where our Human Services Division, which allocates about $10 million a year annually for various poverty and homelessness issues, has about $900,000 in this budget year purely for temporary emergency and seasonal shelters. So, you know, that's a big change. We were arguing about whether we could afford $30,000 back in 2011, and now we're allocating $900,000. That's a significant investment. So I appreciate the work that we're doing to try and be reactive and to the changing environment and set up this Camp 99, but it does need to be fitting into a bigger piece as we expend more and more public resource on this issue. And I look forward to that January 22nd joint elected officials meeting as we get into the final report from the TAC folks and look at how we map out closing the gaps in our system to eventually get to what TAC says we can do within a reasonable period of time to get to zero unsheltered single adults in our community if we follow their recommendations. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you for that review, Commissioner. I just wanted to know what the timeline was on the TAC. When are they coming back? And you know, because I think last time they said they were coming back in a couple of months.
Yes, January 22nd, we have a joint elected official meeting.
Oh, they're not coming back in December.
They are not.
They said didn't they say they were coming back in December?
I don't recall that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. We scheduled a follow-up joint elected official meeting with the city council. So they're not
coming back in December. I just want to be clear on that.
No.
Okay. Yeah. I just have a memory of that you know, you're going to get 3 minutes in October, and you'll get more time in December. So that may be a memory that should not be, but I'm just saying I think that's a delay.
It likely was scheduling the city council and the board of commissioners at a time that we could make that accommodate for everyone.
Okay.
So I don't know the reason that it's in January versus December, but
Okay.
I will say that, we have changes that are happening on the board. Certainly, I don't think there are any changes happening on the city council, but
City council doesn't meet in December for the most part. So.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so maybe, between the holidays and then the fact that we have new commissioners coming on to the Board of Commissioners that, and scheduling conflicts, that it's there. But that's when that report will happen, is January 22nd. And so you'll receive what I believe is the final report from the TAC, and then we'll provide any additional supplemental information to answer some of these questions.
Thank you.
So if that's it on that, then I just had two other brief items, hopefully brief. The Association for Oregon Counties, we have an open item to repay the road fund in the Association of Oregon Counties. I think you all recall this discussion. This was for services rendered to counties, so it was actually services we benefited from that we didn't pay for. I know Commissioner Bozovich, who's on and been involved in the board discussions at AOC, can elaborate on that. The amount the Lane County owes to AOC is $67,489.55. I just wanted to provide this as an update to the board. We're going to reimburse that cost from the general fund reserves. That will be as part of the, you'll see that in the supplemental budget, I believe, that's come before the board in March. So the board will approve that transfer of funds from the general fund reserves. It's a dollar amount that's within the administrator's authority, so we're going to make that payment and then execute the transfer of funds from general fund reserves in March. That's it. I just wanted the board to be aware of that. There was a discussion about that coming forward to the board, but it doesn't require board approval, but I want you to be aware of it. Any questions on that? Then the last thing I'll just note, I communicated with the board about a request to be involved in the United Way campaign as the chair next year, and after discussion on that, and I think an understanding that we have a lot of things happening, particularly in the first 6 months of 2019, with new commissioners coming on board, courthouse work, and other items, that 2019 may not be the best year to be involved in that way. So I followed up with the board in an email. I have been asked to serve in 2020 in that role, and so I'd like to have that discussion with the board in advance of making a decision about that if you were supportive of it. So I just wanted to make note of that in the meeting. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions for the administrator? If not, then if we can quickly get through commissioners' announcements and agenda team requests, then we can break for the lunch with our volunteers. Any commissioners' announcements?
I have a very, very quick one.
Commissioner Farr.
I was at the Oregon Leadership Summit yesterday. It was an all-day summit in Portland attended by a great many people. And I just wanted to point out that during one of the presentations just before lunch, Lane County was featured, and Mr. Mokrahajski was featured as a speaker regarding PERS and government responses to PERS and government responsibility surrounding PERS. Mr. Mokrahajski, I don't believe you knew that you were going to be featured on 3 big screens in front of senators, the governor, and many of the business people and legislators. So well done. I was proud to see your face up there and proud to see the Lane County logo associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Then we'll move on to agenda team requests or work session requests. Any agenda team or work session requests? Seeing none, then I am going to recess the Board of County Commissioners until 1:30 here in Harris Hall. And if you guys don't mind stepping upstairs for our volunteer appreciation luncheon, I'll see you upstairs. So we are in recess.